I'm Marie Vigourou.
I'm Jeremy Greer.
And this is Rude Eats, a delicious podcast where we sink our teeth into every episode of the show Hannibal.
I want Will Graham, I really do. And I think that we could have some fun. Then you can do anything you like. I might even go and help you catch the Shrike. I want Will Graham, I want that man. For every meal and on demand. His mind shines and his body's cut. I know that he works for the FBI, but what other man has pure empathy and the ability to see my mind? Jack, what other thing have I ever asked you for? Besides, never looking into my pantry? And I won't get that either. Damn. I want Will Graham, I want him so. And he really doesn't need to know what's in my meals or on my mind. I just want Will Graham to be mine. I want him and I want him now. I said before, I don't care how. I'll give him tests, he'll draw a clock. And then his dark desires I will unlock. We'll be together, Will and me. We'll throw some grand dinner parties. We'll cut the flesh, we'll cook the meat. He'll eat the food just like me. Give me goddamn Will Graham.
We're here. It's the finale.
I can't believe that we went through season 1 so fast.
I have been wanting you to see this ear scene for so long. I've been wanting... just because it's like just such the epitome of Hannibal's manipulations of Will, and I just have been waiting for it. It took everything in my power not to put it in like the rap that we did for Jake. Like I wanted to mention it, but like it would be. I thought like, well, that she's just gonna feel like it's just gonna be out of context. Like nobody will understand it.
Yes.
Like I wanted it to be, but I've been wanting you to see this finale for quite some time, and I hope it lives up to the hype.
It does. It was definitely like shocking, I have to say, like from beginning to end. A lot of things that happened I wasn't really expecting to happen, so it definitely like subverted my expectations.
Okay,
let's put it that way. And I have to say that the ear thing, like I don't even know how to say this, but like it was so shocking that I was like, I don't even know how to process that. So like I kind of put that in a box somewhere, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's true. That's a thing that happens because it's just so enormous, right? Like what the fuck, Hannibal?
I want to see the scene. I want to see the process, right? Like how that came to be, right? Like that's
exactly like when I realized what was going on, I was like, how did he do it?
Yeah, how did he do it? What is the process? Yeah, absolutely.
Like, did he just like shove it down his throat with 2 fingers? Like, is that what happened? Like, what? Anyway, are we gonna find out?
Why don't you read us the episode summary, Mary?
No! Okay. So today we are covering Hannibal Season 1, Episode 13, Season Finale, Savoureux. Following his strange trip to Minnesota, Graham is taken into custody by Crawford for the probable murder of Abigail Hobbs. They find her severed ear in his kitchen sink and her blood under his fingernails. But how did the ear get into the kitchen sink is the question. Alanna is left devastated by the arrest and is determined to find the cause of Graham's dementia, despite Crawford's insistence that there is no underlying cause. Fuck you, Jack. She has him draw a clock when he tells her that Dr. Lecter had him perform a similar test, and the results solidify her belief that there is a physical explanation for Graham's instability. This was directed by David Slade, written by Steve Lightfoot, and it aired on June 20th, 2013.
So a couple of things that I want to talk about with the finale is that the ending scene of this episode was one of the things that Brian Fuller pitched with the original pitch for the show. He didn't quite know how he was going to get there per se, but he absolutely knew that this is how he wanted it to end. And the way that Red Dragon works, there's a period of time in the book where Will is inside a mental institution, right? Like kind of how we see him at the end of this episode. And it's like 3 pages. It's just a brief hey, this happened. And Brian Fuller was like, let's take those 3 pages and make 13 episodes of TV. Let's see how we can do it.
I love Brian Fuller.
Yes. We just started.
I love this man so much.
We just started rewatching Dead Like Me, which is one of his shows that I've mentioned a few times on the show since a couple of characters have popped up, and it still holds up. It's still really good.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I might do that. I'm looking for something that can serve as a palate cleanser after Hannibal because it just fills me with so much dread. Oh my god.
Yeah, they just released our palate cleanser right now is Autumn is a real big fan of Dame Jilly Cooper's books. She writes these kind of salacious books about soccer or horse riding or whatever, full of sex and rich British people and all this stuff. And somebody adapted Rivals, which is about kind of 2 TV show execs, but there's all kinds of super hot famous people involved in all of this stuff, and it's a lot. It's like the Game of Thrones of who's boning who. I have to get a map, figure out who's doing what to whom. Anyway, I wanted to mention that. There's some other stuff I'll mention as we get into the scene as we're talking about it. But I thought that was super interesting that he this is exactly the way that he wanted to end the show. So.
Well, yeah, so I guess we'll talk about that when we get there. But I also have some thoughts that I realized only afterwards. I'm like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay. Because, again, not knowing anything about the franchise as a whole, I was just like, oh, that's really creepy. But I didn't really understand the implications and the references that this was making. But anyway, I'm excited to talk about that. For now, do you want to talk about what a savoureux is?
Yes, please, tell me.
Well, Jeremy, today we have a scandal in the kitchen is what's happening. Yes.
Somebody threw away my pie from the refrigerator.
Not even. But let me tell you that there is actually no such thing as a meal or a course or a dish in French cooking called savoureux. Okay? That doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Because savoureux and savory don't actually mean the same thing. They look a lot the same, but they're not the same thing. So I know that in English, when you talk about something that's savory, it means something that's salty, right?
Yes.
That's correct? Okay. I'm like, right? Yeah. But in French, savoureux literally just means delicious or full of flavors. It doesn't have anything to do with the flavor profile. So you can say that a cake is savoureux, right? So with that in mind, a savory is actually a British course that comes at the end of a meal, traditionally before or after the pudding, apparently. Which, by the way, I still have no idea what pudding is.
Dude,
this is what... Look, I don't get it.
15 seasons of the Bake Off, and pudding is basically whatever the fuck they decided is that week. I don't know.
I know, right?
Yeah, I have no idea what pudding could be. I know what pudding is here. Because, Bill Cosby told me when I was a child. That was pretty clear what pudding was. But in the British world, I have no idea. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I don't get it. And again, being North American, being French, I don't understand what a pudding is. So maybe people who listen to us who are from Great Britain and from that area can maybe give us some tips and tricks as to recognize what is or isn't pudding. But I don't get it. So yeah, the savory usually comes before or after the pudding, but definitely before the port or the scotch. So before the last thing of alcohol that you have in your meal, right? Before your digestive. And I just thought that it was so interesting for the show to kind of pull this bait and switch at the end of the season, right? Going from French to British traditions. And I figured that there had to be more to that. I kind of really wanted to lean into that. So I kept kind of thinking and churning in the back of my mind, bait and switch, double cross, treachery, betrayal. So we had a talk, you and I, and we decided to go with the theme of betrayal for this episode because it works really well with the narrative, but it's also, savoureux is not a thing. So that's a bit of a quote-unquote very light betrayal of French cuisine here.
I like this a lot. I like the idea of, as these episodes are rolling out, obviously it was the course I mean, it doesn't hold to it exactly, but like roughly, like you're experiencing a meal over 13 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And typically at the end of a meal like this, that you would be served a dessert, something sweet, something delicious, something to kind of sum everything up and like kind of send you home happy. Which this episode does not do as a finale, right? There's nothing sweet.
Not at all.
There's nothing like you're not. I mean, you're satisfied. Like, it's a well done ending. Don't get me wrong, but it's also a cliffhanger, and it's also something that like is terrifying because like we love Will Graham and he's in the most trouble that he's ever been in this show. So like we are fearing for him. So there's a kind of a betrayal of like the concept of what the season titles have been doing this whole time. And then also, as you said, like this whole idea of it not even being like a French thing. Just
I know, which I love actually. Like that's great. So smart.
There's a thing that I love that take a drink, everybody. The video game Elden Ring does.
Yes.
You have a map in that game and you find map fragments, like, and that's kind of part of your progress. And sometimes the map just straight up lies to you. And that's one of my favorite things because like, obviously like maps are historical documents. They're created by people and like things change, like geography changes over time. So notably there's like this one spot, and it's so funny because it looks like you can get up to like a plateau, right? Like you can, but if you go to it, like players leave messages in game all around it was like, see map but liar kind of things. Like it just in game, like it's just really fun. Like it's one of my favorite things. So yeah, I like it when something betrays me. I like when something gets me, right?
Yeah, definitely. Somebody pointed out to me actually last year, and I have not been the same since, that maps, when you think about who mostly created them, around what time historically, and for what purpose, like, you will always understand that maps have an agenda.
Yeah.
You're right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I can never see maps the same anymore.
I'll send you a link later, and I'll try to remember to put this in the show notes, but there's a brief scene in The West Wing where the president's chief of staff like makes all of the like employees of the president, like the direct employees, like listen to quote unquote like crackpot theories from people, and one of them is like people pitching that how wrong like our understanding of maps are of the world map.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll try to remember to send you a link, but it's a thing that when I watched it the first time, I was like kind of blown away. I was like, oh, like, and when we talk about agendas, like of course, like if an American person is writing a map, like it's going to make America look so much bigger than everybody else. So it's insane.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get that. Are we ready to go into our beat by eat?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, to start out with, we have Will. He's in the woods and he's hunting the stag.
He is no longer a fisherman. He's a hunter now.
This is our first introduction to the music, to a musical thing. I don't even know if you could call this music, to be honest with you, but it's like the soundscape, if you will, of these like these. It almost sounds like a motor or like an engine trying to start, like the as it whirls up and down. And this is going to be like consistent throughout the episode. Anytime Will is like dealing with some shit, right? And he aims his gun, he fires, and the stag runs and he chases it, and it looks like the stag was hit, but for a moment the stag looks different, and as Will approaches the tree, he sees there's blood on it, and he looks over and he sees a thing, what the script helpfully notes is a man stag. Which is yeah, I know, it's very funny. Yes, yeah, I love the man stag idea.
Well, so again, I feel like this is so. I want to dive into Will's hallucinations a little bit more now that we know like a lot more about what's going on with him and like who is the stag, which we'll figure out later in this episode. But like, do you think that this is like some kind of weird representation of what happened? Like, do you think that this is Will having a dream about what happened to him that's going to lead to like the ear scene? Like, do you think that he harmed the person who did this to him, kind of thing?
It could absolutely be that.
Okay.
And I think in a way, too, it mirrors the last scene of the finale, or one of the last scenes when he points his gun at Hannibal and accuses Hannibal of being the copycat killer, right? Like,
for sure. Yeah.
he's his unconscious, and I think this is something that's fascinating about Will Graham in general. Like we've been told about his like kind of superpowered empathy, right? Like his ability to get into the minds of these killers. And it's interesting that it seems to be working even without his direct supervision, right? Like over the course of this entire season, we've seen the stag pop up more and more and more. And it's because something has bothered him this whole time, but he's been too distracted with, you know, the pressure from his job, the copycat killings, his own failing mental health, like all of these things around him, his attempt to be a boyfriend to Alanna, which is not very good. So I think like his mind has been turning all this time, and this is part of that. Like this dream is expressing that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder if season 2 is going to give us more of that or no. I don't know.
That's an excellent question.
I don't know. I know that at the end, like he's recovering and whatnot, but I'm like, I kind of liked his crazy hallucinations.
Yeah,
I loved
right?
them. And I'm kind of sad that, you know, they might not be there anymore in season 2.
Don't worry. There's things that happen in season 2, I promise.
Excellent.
Will wakes up from this dream, and he's got this stuttery motion at first, like we saw him with Georgia Mansion. And as he gets up, he realizes his hands and feet are covered in mud. And he's obviously like kind of out of it, like waking up from the stream. He's very kind of disoriented. He goes to the kitchen. He's drinking some water. He's getting some aspirin, and then he begins to choke. And then he throws up into the sink. And as the music kind of spins up, we see this horrifying thing when he looks down and realizes he just threw up an ear.
I think this is the moment that I DM'd you, like, what in the Mike Tyson is going on here? Because it's just so, again, like, it is enormous. You know what I mean? Like, like, why an ear?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Why an ear?
It's
like,
so,
it just doesn't seem...
It's so horrifying, and it's so overwhelming.
Yes.
Like as you mentioned at the top of the episode, like even watching it for the first time, you're like, I can't deal with this. Like I can't even accept the implications of what this is, because like the implications is that he like fucking ate this chick, right? Like that's the horrifying thing, and just like left an ear in his mouth
and finished with the ear.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't
weird.
make any sense.
No,
so weird, and it's I think it's so weird that like I was actually fully expecting this to be a hallucination as well, right?
Yeah.
And that when we were going to look in the sink, we were going to see that there's no ear, it's just in his head. But no. There's an ear in his sink that he threw up, that was in his throat. And I'm like, that's a lot.
That's a lot. And talking about like
Will.
betrayal, right? Like, I love like you're expecting the show to betray you just by showing you things,
Yes.
and then having it to be a hallucination. Like you have that expectation in you, because like the show is obviously like written from an unreliable narrator. Like it's not necessarily showing us things that are true all the time. This is right, but like Will could not trust himself. Like he's being betrayed by his own body. He's been betrayed by his own body mentally for a while now, but now physically, like he's coughing up fucking ears, right? Like it's just gross.
Yes, exactly. Well, there you go. And I think it's like, you know, this idea of like subverting or betraying our expectations or subverting our expectations, like the show has been doing that, and it continues to do that. And it does it in a way that is like so exciting, you know?
Yes.
Because sometimes I find that subverting expectations, like, you know, I'm a bit weary when people say, oh, we will subvert your expectations, because historically I haven't had the greatest of track records with watching shows that wanted to subvert my expectations. But this is good. This is really good.
It's going to be hard to find a show that lives up to this. Like if we ever want to continue continue the podcast after, like I don't know that there's another show that could hold up to this amount of scrutiny and still be great and have us both love it. some time passes and we see Will sitting on the steps. It's obviously cold outside, but he's still like in his boxers and shirt. He hasn't cleaned himself up at all. He's just out there shivering. And we see Hannibal arriving. And Will tells Hannibal he went to Minnesota with Abigail, but Abigail did not come back with him. And it's just, I just hate this so much because, he's calling on his friend, or who he thinks is his friend, to come help him in this, like, one of the most trying times. Like, I know people I would call if I coughed up an ear, right? Like, they're my my best friends in the fucking world, right? Yeah. Like, and it's so sad that, like, we as the audience know this.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Like, when I saw Hannibal walking towards Will's house, I was like, fuck. Like, because that's when you realize what happened, or like, that's when I realized what happened. And again, like, the questions of the mechanics of it is just like, again, too big to really wonder about. Like, I'm not even gonna, you know what I mean? Like, it's so much. And it's really so sad because, like, and upsetting because, like, he trusts Hannibal like so much. Like you said, like, he calls his best bud when he just threw up an ear. Like, Will knows that Hannibal kept Abigail's secret about killing Nick, and he's been keeping that secret for him too, right? So, like, there's an established trust, like, from that huge secret that they're keeping for one another, like that unmentionable, if we want to use the language from earlier in the season, like. And all of that, like, not even he is going to be betrayed, but he is already being actively betrayed by this person in this moment. And I'm sure Hannibal would say otherwise. Like, he would have a very different opinion of this. But, like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, something I want to get into over the course of this episode is Hannibal's view on this, right? And we're going to talk about it a little bit when Hannibal goes to therapy and cries, because I think that's something that's really powerful here. Hannibal tells Will to show me what happened. And they go inside. Hannibal, like, wraps him up in a blanket. It's very cute. Very, very, very cottage core, very normcore, very trad wife. I'm using fun terms I learned at TikTok. Will is the trad wife of this relationship, 100%. Will says that he doesn't remember going to bed, and he's kind of out of it. He's just kind of talking as Hannibal is like, "Where is Abigail? When is the last time you saw Abigail?" He has to, like, forcefully get Will's attention to get him to answer the question.
Like, again, knowing Hannibal, you know that in this moment, he's basically checking to see how to construct his story around the holes in Will's story. And it's like, again, what a fucking betrayal. Like,
yeah, it's so horrible. Will eventually tells him what happened in the cabin in the previous episode. Saying, I hallucinated that I killed her, but it wasn't real. I know it wasn't real. Oh man, this is just heartbreaking. Like, I don't know how you watch this episode and just don't, like, want to pull Will up into a hug. I don't know how you do it.
I just feel like, you know, that meme of, like, Kevin Hart being held up like a baby and the woman, like, just like telling, like, clearly pointing at somebody. Like, this is what I want to do with Will in this moment, right? I want to just be like, get away from him. Like, just get away from him, you know? And you just have to. One thing when I was watching that really, really hit me is, like, how much I admire, like, Will's strength and, like, his own will in this moment, because, like, no matter what's going on, he's just, like, standing so freaking strong in his own knowledge of himself. Like, he is the bedrock or the strong foundation that, like, so many people on this fucking show have promised that they would be for him and consistently failed him. Like, he is literally the only person he has left in his own corner, right? And I'm just like, there's something really that speaks to me about that, like, he knows who he is, right? That no matter what everybody is saying that is messing with his head, unlike Gideon, right?
Yes.
Chilton really got into Gideon's head. Like, Will is like, no, I know that this wasn't real. I know who I am, you know? And I just admire that so much about Will.
it's strength, right? And that's one thing that Will Graham has, even while he's being gaslit, even while he's, under the effects of encephalitis and running a fever and all these things. Like, he still has this like core strength that allows him to believe. Like, he knows in his heart that he could not hurt Abigail. Like, he just knows that he's not that person. He's not a killer, right? Despite, like, that's kind of the thing that he's been grappling with. Like, the whole show really is about identity, right? In a way, and like Will grappling with that and coming to this saying, like, I know it wasn't real, like grasping onto a core of his identity. I would not have killed this innocent girl. Is something that's very powerful, and I think it's really, like you said, admirable, right? Like, it's really nice. And Mads Mikkelsen, this is just such an amazing acting performance, because he's acting as Hannibal, who is acting super concerned for Will as he like sits down and like he's doing everything right. Like, this person suit is so believable that I get pulled into it, even as like an audience member. Like, I just like he has such sympathy for Will, and he even he tells Will, we have to call Jack, and he's almost like regretful when he says that, because he knows the consequences, and you get caught up in believing like, oh, this is Will's friend, and then you kind of forget like he's also a fucking person eating serial killer. Like, I can't
like, he shoved an ear down his throat.
Yeah.
Jeremy, like, that's fucked up.
Yeah, he didn't just like toss it like a piece of popcorn, right? Like, something happened. Something happened, and we Jack and the rest of the FBI team arrive at Will's house, and Jack looks a lot like, I don't know why I put this in my notes. I don't remember doing this.
Jack, but you were right. You should say it.
Yeah, Jack looks like a dad who caught his son in the liquor cabinet, right? Like, or he just looks like more disappointed than angry. And he orders Will to be processed, to be taken in. And he says, like, what are we going to find in Minnesota? And Will's like, I have no clue. I have no idea. We see the ERT group come in, and Zeller and other guy whose name I was definitely going to remember and now forgot already, son of a bitch, walk by with kind of like furtive glances, but Beverly locks eyes with him, and we have like this exchange with him and Beverly, and I think Beverly is like probably the most underused actress from the show, like the most underused character in season 1, and even with that, even without like a lot of Beverly throughout the season, like, this is such a meaningful look between the two of them.
I want to be careful here, because I feel like this is going to be very controversial, what I'm about to say. So our theme is betrayal, right? And I think it's like really easy to see how Jack, Beverly, and the two boys and Alanna would feel like really betrayed by finding out that Will might have killed Abigail, right? And the reason why I want to be careful is because if he really had, the conversation would be different. And I do want to say this like out the front, because I don't want to be misconstrued, kind of thing. Because I would feel very uneasy blaming the actions of one person on other people if he had really done it. But we know that he didn't kill Abigail, right? Like, we know who did.
Yeah.
And so in that case, I feel comfortable saying what I'm about to say, which is that, like, I can't help but feel like Jack, Beverly, like the two boys and Alanna, have betrayed Will, by not noticing that something was wrong with him, or by not getting the help that he needed.
Yes.
When they had an inkling, because they all had an inkling. Like, let's be very clear, right? But they were all like, oh no, it's none of my business. Maybe I shouldn't be worried about this. Like, anyway, this makes me really, really angry. Like, I just feel like the people around Will failed him, right? I've been saying this for the better part of the season, but here, like, it's really just like, it's the climax of that.
It
right?
brings it all home, right? Like, this is the moment, right? Like,
exactly.
Where everybody.
This is it.
I don't feel like what you're saying is controversial, by the way. Like, I think I agree with you. I would defend Beverly, because I feel like Beverly like tried. She probably like didn't feel that she had that she wasn't in the right position to like try more.
But did she though?
I mean, she like reached out a couple of times.
But that's the thing, like.
But like Alanna and Jack. We're
gonna talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's just that, like, because at one point, like, I think it's a little bit later on where she's like, oh, you shouldn't have been in the FBI. And I'm like, girl, you went out to meet him in the middle of the night because he was having like a mental health crisis.
You're not
how
wrong.
was your first call not to call an ambulance? You know what I mean? Like, this is like... Listen, you don't need to have special mental health training to see that somebody is not doing well in that moment. You know what I mean? Like, and again, this is where like I want to be careful between like personal responsibility of Will versus like the responsibility of those around him, because like I think that that's a nuanced conversation to have. But like, if one of my friends called me out in the middle of the night to a fucking crime scene where just like a few hours ago they were covered in blood because they had a big freak out, and they were having this mental health crisis of like, I don't know who I am, I'd be like, okay, buddy, you know what? Let's get in the car and we're going to go for a drive, right? Like, this is like, I know it just seems so obvious to me that this is, you know what I mean?
And you're
like,
not wrong.
Why,
I was defending Beverly naturally, but
of course, because we love Beverly.
but you're right. There were opportunities where she could have done something, probably done something more. I think it's easy to blame. It's easy to focus a lot of this blame on Jack because he's the person in charge, and we're gonna see that a lot in this episode, right? Like people are going to blame Jack for this, and it's
they should though.
Yes, absolutely. It's infuriating.
As they should, because he was the main person who was responsible for this. Anyway.
We see Will's dogs being loaded up into a van, and Winston, the dog that he rescued in I think it's the very first episode, it just sits there and looks at him with this like, oh, kind of look, and like Will sees it out the window, and it's just very sad.
I cried.
Poor Winston.
I like actually cried in that moment. I was like, no, not the dogs. I hope that Will gets a good vindication moment in season 2. Like, he deserves it, you know?
Yeah, things are going to work out great for Will. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. Will's great. I told you he was going to be fine at the end of the season 1, and I was right. He's fine. He's good.
Okay. All right.
Will is processed, and they're basically inventorying his pockets and everything on his person. And then Beverly begins to scrape underneath his fingernails, and we see what's very obvious, like blood flakes coming out of it. And she even says, like, I can't pretend that I don't know you, and I can't pretend that like you don't know what I'm finding at your fingernails. And she asks him where the blood comes from, and he's like, I don't know with any certainty. I can't tell you. And this is the scene that she brought up where she says, if you were certain with yourself, you should have been here. This is the FBI. And he just says, I thought I would get better. And this is really frustrating because, like, if we consider that Will is not technically part of it, he's like a special agent or whatever. Like he's not, you know, he's not an actual agent of the FBI. And that he was there specifically because of Jack, right? Like Jack is the one that brought him into this and that like stood up for him and was arguing that he needs a place there. And we've seen Jack so many times tell Will, like push that responsibility back onto Will of like, well, if you don't think you need to be here, then you can leave. Like just let people die, Will. And it's so frustrating because again, like you were saying, like it's just the betrayal of everybody around him to not see what was going on or to not help is very frustrating to watch.
I think that's the thing. Like everybody around Will knew what the right thing to do was, which was to like not allow him near these cases, right? Like, let's be real. If you're going to bring these cases to trial, maybe I'm being too literal at this point, but if you're going to bring these cases to trial and one of the people who figured out what was going on is like mentally ill and like in an institution for the criminally insane, like your case isn't going to go very far. You know what I mean? Like it's like just thinking about like the sustainability of this is absolutely like mind-boggling to me. And I don't like, I know that I'm being very, very harsh with Beverly, and I'm so sorry because I do love her. But like, I don't know, like there's something, maybe I just love Will too much, or this is like my own trauma that's resurfacing about people like not doing the thing that they're supposed to do when somebody is in like a mental health crisis or a crisis of any kind, and they don't have, because that's the thing, like Will doesn't have all his faculties, right? Like he doesn't have the capacity to know what is really good for him or not in that moment, right? And like I know how difficult it is to be like, I will intervene, because you will never be popular in those situations, right? Everybody will tell you that it's not your place, but like, I promise you, it is your place to step in when somebody is just not able to make their own decisions. Like bring them to people who can make those decisions for them.
Yes.
Sorry. Like this is just, This is
You don't have to be sorry at all. No, I think you're absolutely
personal.
right. Yeah.
I'm really upset about this, Jeremy.
And I don't think that you love Will too much, right? Like I think Will is definitely the sympathetic character in all of this, and I think he deserves more. And it's one of those great, narrative storytelling moments where you get so caught up in this fictional character that you just care for them, like you just love them so much that you don't want anything to happen to them, even though if nothing happened to them, like there wouldn't be a story.
Yes, exactly. And like, let's be real. Will is a fictional character. Nobody got hurt, right? Like, I'm okay.
But also at the same time, fuck y'all, fuck all y'all.
Fuck y'all. Exactly. Like, and that's the thing again with this idea of like watching fiction in order to kind of like figure out some things in your own life. Like, for me, I think what this screams is like, be that person to like reach out and make sure that people are okay, right? Like, and it's not your responsibility to do that all the time, but like sometimes it is. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it is. Because we are a community of human beings who live together. Anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Beverly challenges him to interpret the evidence like he always does, right? And we get the same broken smile from Will that we got when Hannibal was asking him to smile to see if the seizure was a stroke, right? Like if he had lost any kind of ability to control his body. It's the exact same broken smile, and he's like, "Well, if I put together the evidence, then I killed Abigail Hobbs." It's almost a confession, like where he just can't help himself from saying it, and it's very powerful. We move from here to Jack explaining to Alanna what's been happening, what's been going on, and talk about not being able to process it. Like she just immediately tells him to shut up and stop talking. Like she's just horrified at this like shocking turn of events, right? And that comes out as anger towards Jack because she realizes that Jack was pushing Will. And even though like Jack was like, well, he was saving lives, and she rightfully points out not Abigail Hobbs's life. And
I think that this is such a beautiful moment of righteous anger. Right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Like, I love a good moment of righteous anger, and this was really good, I found.
It's a brilliant moment, right? Like I think especially because Alanna Carolyn Davernas is so she's so angry. Like she brings this to life so beautifully. I've never been like the kind of dude that like reads scripts and like wants to learn how to make movies or anything. Like I've always just wanted to enjoy movies or anything. I never really wanted to be like in the mechanical part of it. But as research for the show, I've been reading the scripts for these last few episodes, and like it's so plain on the page. Like, and it's a miracle how much like the acting, the direction matters in these moments, because like on the page, it's just like, she's upset or whatever. And I'm like, but she's like fucking broken right now. And you feel that from her. And it's even more frustrating when Jack is like, well, every decision I made was with the counsel of Hannibal, was with the medical professional.
Oh my God. I was so mad because he adds like, which you recommended. And I'm like, that's a fucking lie.
Yes.
You are covering your ass, Jack Crawford, because the number of times that he has told Hannibal that they were going to have to agree to disagree, like, fuck you, Jack.
Yes.
Honestly, like, oh my God, I was so mad in that moment. Because like, they're also like, Jack and Alanna are arguing also in that moment about like, both of them being able to see that Will was breaking, right? They're trying to like, they're kind of playing like blame ping pong in this moment, right? Where Jack says that like, yeah, he could see it, but like he kept pushing to save lives. And Alanna says that like, yeah, she could see it, and she told Jack not to put Will out there. And I think that this is like such an important moment because both of them are admitting for the first time that they could see that Will was not well, but that they didn't do anything about it.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think the weight of that, I think Alanna truly is the only character, the only person in this situation who really realizes the implications of that. And like, that makes her so human to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I know that I had my reservations about Alanna at the beginning of the season, but like, I take it all back. Like, I love her.
I really need to find that bell so I can just clip some stuff that she says sometimes.
Oh no.
He also tells her that Hannibal has a theory about Will potentially having dementia. And she points out, like, and she screams it, and dementia isn't a disease, it's a symptom of disease. And we need to find out the cause and treat it. As the episode summary says, like, she's convinced that this isn't Will being a serial killer. This is Will having some sort of neurological problem that they need to find. And Jack is almost like having a different conversation at this point. Like, he's still pretty shocked in his own way. And he says, maybe Will did what Garrett Jacob Hobbs couldn't. He killed his daughter. And Alanna looks at him and says, Abigail's blood is on all of us.
I don't know how much of this is Jack also just being like, it is impossible that there's a disease because then it's my fault.
Yes.
Right? Like, he's trying to, I don't know how much of that is a thing, because now not only does Jack have to deal with the fact that, like, his wife had cancer and he didn't know, but he also has to deal with the fact that, like, Will has a neurological disease and that he pushed that away, right? Because we talked a lot about Jack, like, pushing, like, just not listening to conversations, not being available for certain conversations. And I feel like this is like the looping in on itself kind of thing, where he's like, oh shit, I have not changed, or like, I have done it again. And I don't know how much of it is conscious, but I do think that he is looking for an alternative explanation in order not to have to reckon with his implication in all of this, right? And Alanna is the only one who is reacting in like the most quote unquote normal or sane or like empathetic way, right? Because she's like, Abigail's blood is on all of us, right? Like, everyone else is trying to blame somebody else or something else, and she's the only one who's actually willing to be like, yeah, this was a group fail. And it was. She's right.
A group fail is very funny. I don't know why that's just very funny. I don't know why that's just an amusing phrase for me. So
it's because, like, I have this thing where I call certain things like a community fail. Like, and this feels like a community fail to me. Like, it's one of those moments where, like, if the community had been there and had actually talked to each other and taken meaningful action, things would probably not have turned out the way that they did. And in this case, like, this is the textbook definition of a community fail.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's leaving Will out to dry in a very, very specific way.
And Abigail.
And Abigail, frankly, too. Yeah. We have this great moment of Alanna in her car just screaming. We don't hear it. It's all silent. And as the music kind of swells up around her, as a kind of the slow melody plays, but she's like screaming and like hitting her steering wheel, as we've all done from time to time in our lives. Like, everybody's screamed in a car before.
Of course.
So,
oh yeah.
Meanwhile, Will is in custody. He's in an orange jumpsuit in this like interrogation room as Alanna arrives. He sees that she's like flush and says that, have you been crying? And she's like more like screaming. And he has a really great line of, I could use a good scream. I feel one perched under my chin. And he's worried that if he starts screaming that he won't be able to stop. Yeah. Totally agree. Totally agree, Will.
I feel that. Yeah. Let's move on.
He's surprised that Alanna is even allowed in the room given his romantic overtures. And she says, well, Jack wasn't aware of our romantic overtures until, or at least he wasn't. And she looks at the mirror on the wall, and we see a clip of Jack just going like, Jesus Christ, how much of this stuff do I not know? Yeah. And he says, I guess you dodged a bullet. And she says, I don't feel like I dodged a bullet. I feel wounded. Oh, man, it was such a good line too. And she's just perfection in this scene too. Like, she's the eyes and like the way that her face is like colored, and because she's had this emotional reaction and she's trying to stay calm as she has this conversation with Will. She tells him that she's going to take care of his dogs till basically whenever, basically because they don't know what his future holds. And he says like, whenever could be a long time. And she's like, well, then I'll take care of him until then.
I take back everything that I said about doubting Alanna. Like, she's taking care of his dogs. She's empathetic. Like, I don't know. I know that this show is really terrible at like making people turn out to be not what you thought that they were. But I really hope that Alanna stays the way that she is, because that's like, yeah.
I should also have a note here where just her dress is absolutely fabulous. It's the same thing she wore in the conversation with Jack, but she is just the fashion in this show is just incredible.
And also, like, when she's screaming in the car, she's wearing a blue coat. The car is blue. Her eyes are like so blue, and it's just like she is literally like wrapped up in Will.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's such a good observation. Yeah, because it's like that's his color, right? Like that's his. That's such a good observation. Yeah. She wants to give him a series of tests, and he's like, I guess you want me to draw another clock, and she focuses in on it like. Hannibal made you draw a clock, and he's like, yeah, and she explains that he explains that it was a basically a test to or a way of him confirming his identity. And I love this line, this exchange where she says, was it a normal clock? And he says, would I be here if it wasn't? And like, knowing what we know is just what a scream.
I know, right? Like, it's like, in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to figure it out. She's going to figure it out. She's going to figure it out. She has to figure it out. You know, just kind of like, as has happened so many times on this show, I was just like, we came so close.
So close. And of course, he draws a clock, and he thinks it's normal, and says to her, like, telling time isn't my problem. And she goes, no, that's the least of your problems. Because she looks at it, and of course, it's the distorted clock that we've seen several times. Yeah. We go from this directly to Hannibal.
In Only Murders in the Building, actually, there was this really interesting moment in season 4 that's currently coming out as we're recording this in October for January 19th. And at one point, one of the characters is like, have him draw a clock. And the gasp that I gasped, I was like, oh my God, this show! Anyway.
Hannibal has tears running down his eyes as he talks to Bedelia about his feelings about Abigail, about his desire to have her still be alive. And I think this is an interesting scene because it shows a lot of complexity of Hannibal. Like I think it's like the idea that he's crying here, like, is this a performance, right? Like, or is this something that he genuinely feels? Like, how are you taking this?
I don't know.
Which is a totally fine and correct answer, by the way. Yeah, because I think it's even somebody who's watched the season several times, like, it's a really difficult question to answer within the context of what we know in season 1. Like this emotion that he's carrying is difficult to unravel because we've never seen him express a lot of emotions at all.
Well, so that's the thing, because I feel now, with what I know about Bedelia, that he wouldn't feel obliged to perform that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like he wouldn't need to put on the waterworks kind of thing. Like, it wouldn't, like, he could pretend to look a certain way, like sad or upset or whatever, but he wouldn't need to do that much, right? And again, we know that he's a diva and he's a drama queen and whatever, and so, like, you know, performance is in his nature, but I'm just like, I feel like he doesn't need to do all that much with Bedelia. And so then, like, so he experiences feelings then, right? Like, he experiences those, like, he has them. And I don't know, like, what I kept wondering during this scene is just like, why did he kill Abigail? Like, what was the logic behind it? Like, was it specifically to frame Will, or was it to protect himself, or was it for both? Like, I don't understand how his mind works, because I'm starting to understand how a lot of characters' motivations, right? Bedelia is going to talk about a pattern later on, but she doesn't talk about motivations for Hannibal. And I'm finding that really unsettling, because I can't make sense of why he does things.
So I think one thing that we haven't talked about in our discussions with Hannibal, and as far as who he is like the great narcissist that he is, right? Like this belief in himself that he is capable of making a decision of who lives or dies, that is, his inherent taste, his inherent like finer things, his ability to judge things that are rude or not, are basically better than everybody else's. And I wonder how much that's playing into, like, he killed Abigail, but he did it for a reason, and he knows that reason to be true. Like, it's to him, it's like undisputable that she had to die.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is a thing that had to happen. But everything in my brain, everything in my great, huge, better than everybody else's brain is telling me that this has to be done. But then he still has this part of him that mourns it. Even though he considers everything that he does right and just, right, like that he or it has to be done, he still has these feelings. And I've said this throughout this entire season as we talked about this. Like, the only times we see him really react to people as people and react to people as a person himself is with Abigail and Will, and to a lesser extent Bedelia. And as Bedelia is going to say here in a bit, like, where he talks about like hundreds of billions of people have died since humans have been on the earth, and she says something to the extent of but none of them have bothered you as much as Abigail's has, right? And I think that's a shot home. Like, he allowed these people, specifically Abigail and Will, like, in a little bit, and even though he thinks that he had to kill her, even though he believes that to his core, it still makes him extremely sad that she's gone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think I agree with this assessment, because it seems like that's what he's saying, right? Like, he knows that there's a reason why she had to go, and I think we find out later why that is, right? He chose Will over Abigail because I think he could have saved one of them and framed the other, right? Or vice versa. And I think he chose to keep Will alive. Because saving Will cost Abigail her life, right? I think he says at one point. And it's like, oh, okay, so you did this to, quote unquote, save Will, but he's still really sad about Abigail. Like, I do think that the feelings are genuine.
Yes.
To try to answer your question from earlier. Because I have a hard time understanding his motivations, to be honest. Because he plays God in a way that, like, is so extreme, right? Like, that I just, like, it seems so foreign to me
in some ways
to reflect on this kind of behavior.
In some ways, Hannibal, like, channels a lot of the stuff that I get from H.P. Lovecraft books, where, like, just a great unknowing, entity, basically, like this thing that's so alien to our consciousness that we can't even comprehend it. Like, Hannibal acts that way sometimes, not to that extreme extent, but, like, close, right? Like, where the way that his internal brain works is so different than, I think, the average person. Like, the glimpses we get inside of him don't really illuminate. If anything, they complicate our feelings more, right? They can confound us more as we get more information about the way he thinks. Because we would have assumed up to this point that, like, killing is second nature to him, because he's never expressed any feelings about any of the people that he's killed up to now. It's just been literally them getting rid of insects or whatever that he views them in his head. And this is the first time we've seen him have feelings, and it's startling. It's confounding to us. So,
really, it is, and it's, in a way, I like to keep with the theme of betrayal. I feel like this is a betrayal of our expectations. Again, like, there's a subversion of our expectations in this moment, to see Hannibal, like, genuinely distraught over having killed his own daughter. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so ridiculous to say out loud, but that's where we are, apparently.
And in a way, it mirrors the thing that Will is going through with Garrett Jacob Hobbs, right, because Garrett was unable to kill his own daughter versus Hannibal, who was, but still feels sad about it, still feels like he was right about it, but was able to actually do it. There's some really great lines here. I love when Bedelia says that grieving is an individual process with a universal goal. I think that's, as somebody who's done a lot of grieving in his life about various things, I think that's a really eloquent way to describe it. And Hannibal talks about that he never considered having a child, but Abigail changed him and made him realize what it was like to have, to direct a life. Like, and Bedelia asks, like, you were having influence on her, and he says, like, almost with sadness, I hope I was. And this is a really this is the thing I love about Hannibal so much is this is a really heartfelt thing, right? Like you can see that he genuinely believes that he wanted to have influence on her to change her as she has changed him in some way. But we know that he was turning her into a fucking serial killer. Like
I know, right? I know. That's why it's so weird to me to be having this conversation, because I'm like, I know that Hannibal is seeing this as like a really positive thing, right? To change people to like embrace their killer instincts, I guess. But like, yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
And I think that Bedelia has this line that I thought was really, really interesting, that like he seems surprised by the fact that Abigail has affected his life.
Yes.
Like he was not expecting it. And I think that there's something profound about that as well. Like that he thought that she was just going to be another plaything, maybe. Like, because again, like I don't know if he's done this before. Has he done this before? There's apparently a pattern. I don't know, but we don't know that. But this time, for some reason, like a connection was made, right? There was a connection there.
I can't wait to talk about the pattern, by the way. But we'll talk about it towards the end of the episode, but I think there's some super interesting stuff to talk about there. Hannibal describes himself as thinking about his lifetime as his taking his earliest memory and projecting it into the future of what he imagines his death to be, and he's never considered living beyond that time frame, other than by reputation, which again, like talking about just what a narcissist this dude can be sometimes. And of course he's convinced that they're going to find Will guilty for murder, and as they talk about this, as they discuss it, Bedelia warns him, like, if they do, you should not participate in any sort of rehabilitation for Will.
This is not the first time that she's like actively trying to get him to walk away from Will. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe she can tell that like Will is going to be Hannibal's downfall.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, this boy, you like this boy too much, Hannibal.
You like this guy, you like him a little too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you should go find a safer boy.
Yeah, there you go. Go find somebody that, you know, people don't really care about, because people care about Will.
Yeah,
you know.
Go find your Travis Kelce. Sorry.
I'm not going to comment on that one. Go ahead, continue.
Hannibal says that he was confident in his ability to help. He was so confident in his ability to help Will, to solve Will. And Bedelia corrects him by saying, like, to save him. And this is where he says like, by saving him, I lost Abigail, which you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I really do think that this is in his mind. Like, he thinks, or he thought, or like his plan, or whatever it is that you want to call it. It was like, you can only keep one, kind of thing. Like, you have to choose one or the other. And he chose Will over Abigail.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. It's just, it is the way it is, right? Like, and I don't know.
Hey, we got 2 more seasons to complicate our thoughts about this whole situation.
Right.
Who knows what we will learn in the future that will cast a shadow over this. He confesses to I'm sorry. I can't help it. It's so fun. People at home are losing their minds right now. I just have to acknowledge them a little bit. I have to give them a little tasty morsel. So,
like a savory,
like a little savory, a savory. He confesses to losing profoundly, so profoundly, when he was trying to save or solve Abigail or Will. And you could tell Bedelia, like, gives him a fucking look, like a look with 2 eye emojis in the middle is what I'm saying. Like, just a serious fucking look.
Yeah, Bedelia knows.
Yeah, it's the she knows.
Oh, yeah.
The sound from TikTok, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we cut from here to an up-close view of a fly lure being knotted. Jimmy, who was the other guy whose name I've never been able to remember in 13 episodes, and Beverly are telling the rest of the group, Jack and Alanna is here as well, that all of Will's fishing lures have human remains. So there's one from Cassie Boyle, there's one from Marissa, there's one from Sutcliffe, and their last one is even from Georgia Mansion. And Zeller describes this as trophies that the copycat killer was taking from his victims, and Jack is aghast at this idea.
Jack is like, nah, because like he's like, oh, so now Will is a serial killer taking trophies. He's like, no, that doesn't make sense. Even Jack is like,
Even
that
Jack,
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's like, oh my god.
But that's the thing. Like, Jack is actually like a quote unquote competent law enforcement person, right? Like, he is actually good at his job. As we've seen over and over, like he had the right instinct about Abigail, like, and so he's like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand how this is possible, right? And yet, when I listened to this, I was like, wow, Will is never getting out of prison. Like Hannibal has concocted this story, so he has crafted this story so intricately that there's no way, and he has planted physical evidence in such a way that, like, of course, law enforcement is going to be like, well, obviously he's the killer, right?
The fishing lures is a strong touch. Like, how do you have the time? And I think it's kind of fascinating that we saw him. Like, we had that whole scene with him in the fishing lures earlier in the season, right? Like, when he goes to check on Will's dogs while Will is out of town, like he like pokes himself with the thing and like sips his own blood in that weirdly hot way.
Yes.
So like he obviously saw this and like kept it for later. And I think a couple episodes I was describing that how Hannibal almost has like an automatic defense system. Like, he just kind of, his brain just works at such a level where he's like, oh, I'm just going to knock this statue over so it looks more like I was the one being attacked, and I can like create my own narrative about it. And like, I feel like he's just automatically collecting this stuff, even though like he's not consciously doing it.
I think it's also a callback to, like, you know how, well, I mean, I definitely felt like imminent danger in that moment when he was walking around Will's house, even though we eventually learned that Will had asked him to be there. But like, I think it just goes to show that like that sense of danger that we had when he was there was justified. Yeah. Right? Like, we were right in thinking that there was something really dangerous in him being in Will's environment, because look at what he used that for, right? Like, you weird little psycho.
Alanna continues to insist that there's nothing wrong with Will, that he's not like, there's something wrong with him neurologically. He's not a serial killer. And you really have to appreciate Alanna for this standing up, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like, she is also standing firm in her knowledge of Will, right? And like, good for her. It's a little too late, but like, good for you. Like, I'm actually really happy about that.
We go to the interrogation room where Will is still at, and he sees in the script, this is referred to as the antlered man, Will's personal devil.
Oh. So it's no longer the man stag?
It's no longer the man stag, it's the antlered man.
Okay.
And it's, you know, what does this look like to you at this point? Like, are you... Because you DM'd me like, oh, Hannibal is the stag. But like, does this look like Hannibal to you at this point?
I didn't feel like it looked like Hannibal, but okay. I was like, oh, Hannibal is on the other side of the glass in that moment. I was like, okay. Will can feel, because again, like, I take Will's hallucinations as like a way for his subconscious to try to reach his conscious mind. Kind of like the way that I talked about how people with Cotard syndrome, like this man in this case, in a case that I read where he was like, I feel like half of my heart, the right half of my heart has died. But in fact, it was the right side of his brain that was inflamed. Like, I feel Will's visions are telling him something about what's going on. And so I'm like, if Will sees the antlered man behind the glass or in the glass, then like Hannibal must be on the other side of that glass, right? Yes. Like that's what I took from it. Maybe not. I don't know. But that was my interpretation.
Will wakes up from his vision and is startled to discover Jack there. Jack has apparently been talking to him for some amount of minutes. He says that he was careless with his antibiotics and the fever came back, which is why his hallucinations got stronger, which is why he kind of went out of control there. And he wonders if they're going to put him in the Baltimore Institute for the Criminally Insane, but to put him under Chilton's care, which is, I wonder if that's going to happen. Jack says, "We found your fishing lures," and Will is like, "Yeah, I hope so. They were like right there, dude." Like, what are you talking about? And Will's face as Jack begins to describe the human remains they found and the materials that the fishing lures were made from, it's just, he's so shocked. And he even says, like, "I wasn't sick when Cassie Boyle was murdered."
I love that in this moment, Will is basically like, I can excuse killing Abigail, but I draw the line at Cassie. Like, I just love that for Will. But I mean, I also think that it's really interesting that, like, our diva Hannibal, like, is like I said, like, he's crafting this story so perfectly for the investigators to, like, weave together, right, through, like, forensics, right? He's trying to make their job as easy as possible for them, but it becomes more and more easy for Will to kind of untangle, because he knows he didn't do it, right? He knows, or at least he knows that he didn't kill Cassie Boyle, right? And I think that this is really when Will realizes for sure that he's being framed, right? Because that's also, like, the conversation shows it just after this, right? Like, the fishing lures is what gave it all away for him.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to see this later, right? Like, Will's going to talk about this specifically later, which I find kind of fascinating. Jack is worried because Will says, like, he can't confess to things he doesn't remember, and Jack is like, I'm more worried about the things that we're going to find out what more that you don't remember. And Will says, you don't need to worry about that. You need to worry about the person doing this to me. He'll be close to you. He'll know the cases. They know forensics. They know that I'm unstable. He even says, like, oh, it could just be you. And like, where would I be if that's the case? Like, he's.
Yeah.
And Jack just tells him that he's being paranoid. He asks, do you know how paranoid you sound? And I just feel so much for Will in this moment. Like, it's hard not to have the sympathy right now.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like, this is so, the physical evidence is so damning in this moment, but it's like, for me, this is peak horror personally. Like, literally, like, Will is yelling at others to be careful because something terrible is happening or going to happen, and nobody is listening. Like, I literally have different versions of this exact recurring nightmare, like, in different forms, but, like, that is something that terrifies me to my core.
Absolutely. Like, being able to speak to people and not be understood or be taken the wrong way, right? Like, I think it's a core thing of who you are as a person. And again, like, this plays with the idea of identity. This plays with the idea of betrayal. Like, this is all, all of this is kind of layered into everything that Will is going through, and realizing, like, somebody is betraying him. He doesn't know who, but it's, somebody is. Jack says he wants to be the one he wanted to be the one to do this, and he Mirandizes Will. And Will is escorted into an ambulance outside where he's going to be presumably taken to jail. And we have, I think it's a very direct nod to the scene with Dr. Gideon when he was in the ambulance with two guards, and Will is now in the same exact spot, even on the same side of the ambulance. He breaks his thumb and he jumps the guards.
Like, when there was this close up of, like, his hands in the handcuffs, I was like, oh my God, don't do it. Will, don't do it. Don't you dare do it. Like, I was just like, no, you're going to make it worse.
There's a ton of movies out there about people being framed and the lengths they go to try to prove themselves. And a lot of times, like, one of the things that they play with is, like, how extreme the behavior is of the person trying to prove that they're sane or that they're right or that they didn't do something. And, like, this doesn't help Will at all, right?
No,
at all. Like, this makes everything worse for Will from a judge point of view, I guess.
Yes, of course. Yeah, 100%. And again, like, I will continue saying that, like, Will does not have all his faculties at the moment, right? Like, Will cannot think straight because he has a neurological issue, the way that Alanna keeps saying, right? Like, and I think Yes, there you go. I'm going to take a deep breath before I say again that, like, this is something that the people around him should have noticed before. True. There you go. And I said it calmly. You know, I feel much like Alanna. I am wounded, right? Like, I feel wounded. Like, I don't feel good about this.
It's going to be fine. Season two is going to make it all better. Don't worry. Every reveal, it's rainbows and sunshine all the way. Alanna, Jack, and Hannibal meet at Hannibal's office, and Jack tells them what Will did, escaping the ambulance, and says, like, straight out, this is not the action of an innocent man. And Alanna is still insisting that there's, you know, something neurological going on, and she produces the clock that he drew in the interrogation room. And man, how angry were you when Hannibal brings out this copy of the clock? I was watching this and I'm like, Mary's going to have some opinions about this.
I just felt so defeated. I was like, fuck. Like, because he's always just a few steps ahead, right? Again, it's this idea of, like, he has thought this through. Because, like, again, when you see Alanna, like, having Will draw a clock, you're like, she's going to figure it out. And she does, right? She knows that something's wrong. And so she questions Hannibal in a respectful way. And Hannibal has an answer, right? Which is this fabricated clock that he drew himself and is passing off as Will.
She even jumps to the conclusion that it might be encephalitis. And I just want to scream.
And I think that there's something really interesting that's happening here, because you can tell that she's both, like, suspicious of Hannibal, but also, like, she doesn't believe that he could be doing this maliciously, right? And she's trying to, like, I don't want to say make excuses, but, like, make explanations for his behavior. She's like, oh, well, you know, and she says it so earnestly too, poor baby girl. She's like, it wouldn't show up on a brain scan unless you knew what you were looking for. And in that moment, Hannibal gives her a look, and I was like, oh no. She is going to end up on that fucking dinner table. He is going to eat her. Oh my God. Yeah.
I find it interesting that she thinks she is suspicious of Hannibal and trying to justify what Hannibal is doing, because I read this scene almost as she is extremely suspicious of Will, like her belief in Will's
Really?
Yeah, that's just the way I interpreted it. The way when I was watching the scene, I was like, oh, she's losing faith in Will. Like, she's, with this evidence, she's thinking that it might not be neurological. Like, she's grasping at straws to try to prove it, but she's like that bedrock is crumbling. So I find it very interesting that you put that on Hannibal, because I think it works both ways, right? Like, I think it definitely works.
Absolutely. So. I think that's the beauty of it. I think for me, the reason why I'm saying that I think she's suspicious of Hannibal is because of the conversation earlier about Will saying that he had him draw clocks, right? Like, and she says also, like, Hannibal had to know that something was going on. Mm-hmm. And so she's like trying to question Hannibal without making it sound accusatory, because they're colleagues, right? So, like, you're finding out that, like, I don't know, something with one of the clients went wrong and your colleague was, like, in charge of it, but you really like that colleague and he's, like, usually really competent, and you're like, well, I don't want to make it sound accusatory, but also, like, what the fuck happened, kind of thing.
You're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. That's how I read it. Like, he needs to be able to like, what the fuck happened? Yeah.
Exactly. Like, how come we just lost $1 million? You know what I mean? Like,
Alanna and Hannibal go on for a little while with the medical talk, and you can tell Jack's getting very frustrated with it. And finally, he's just like, hey, could he kill 5 people and not remember it? And Hannibal tells him, like, you know, Will was alone around the time that Garrett Trockett Jacob Hobbs was called. And he describes the moment that we saw in the first scene where, like, Hannibal created those, like, 10 seconds, right? And it's just so, man, you just hate a liar. Like, you just hate a liar sometimes.
I know, right? I was actually so upset about this. Like, and I know that, like, lying is probably, like, the least of Hannibal's problems, or, like, the least of, like, his bad traits. But, like, it made me so angry. Like, I was almost less bothered by him killing Abigail than by him lying about what I know to have happened, because I saw it with my own eyes, you know? I was just like, no, you can't lie about this. But I'm almost willing to, like, understand why he killed Abigail. I don't know. Like, I know how ridiculous that sounds, but, like, that's just where I am emotionally, I guess.
Man, it's tough being around a liar. That's when you know they're lying, right? Like, it's just, because it's insulting, I think. It's like,
it is.
oh, you think you can say this and I just will believe you. And it's so bothersome how everybody does in the show so far, right? Like everybody, there's been nobody to doubt Hannibal at all throughout this entire 13 episodes. Jack asks a really important question, and I think an absolutely astute question, because again, Jack is pretty good at his job despite our problems with his personality. He asked if Will could fake this clock test, and man, it's just pulled out of Alanna. Like, she doesn't want to say it, but she does eventually say yes, he could.
I have to point out, like, just how quickly they went to him, like, faking a major illness. And, like, again, in my line of work, I'm just like, oh yeah, of course they would make this vulnerable person, like, make him out to be a liar about, like, his condition. And I just, yeah, again, community fail. Because, like, who the fuck is Jack to say that he's faking? Like, he's not, like, you know what I mean? Like, he gets mad about the medical talk, but he's not a doctor. He's not a psychiatrist. Like, he has no knowledge of like what could be going on with Will. And he's not letting the professionals do their job. Like, he's just shutting them down. Okay. Like, I need to calm down. My blood pressure is so high right now.
You know, there's streamers on, like, Twitch that have, like, blood pressure monitors on while they play, like, scary video games, and they show we should do that while we're recording, right? Like, and just put that somehow put that in the audio. Like, do a little thump in the background as you get heated about something.
Oh my god, yes, we should do that. That would be funny.
Some time passes, and Hannibal is alone in his office, and he smells something, and it's Will, who is upstairs in his library. Before we get too far into what actually happens in this scene, I think it's important to recognize that this is almost exactly how Will was the first time he was in Hannibal's office, where he was up top, and he slowly descended the stairs, and here the same thing happens, where he goes from pulled back, reserved, to sitting directly across from Hannibal to allow Hannibal to give him therapy, right? Which didn't happen in that first episode. They never actually sat down in that for the first time he was in Hannibal's office. And I think it's important to talk about, or at least to mention, the fact that this time, like, he goes through that entire process and sits down. It's just, again, like, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point that we keep making, but, like, it's just so fucking heartbreaking that Will doesn't have actual real help right now, because, like, he's relying on his best friend who is fucking him over, and it's just, I'm so upset about it.
It's like, and that's the thing, like, it's his best friend who is also his psychotherapist, or his psychiatrist, and who's fucking him over, and it's like, this is so wrong on so many levels.
Hannibal says that Will scared Alanna, and there's a deleted scene that was cut for time where Will shows up at Alanna's house.
Oh, really?
And, where he's like, oh, and, like, tries to basically, like, say that he's sane, but he comes off like a fucking crazy person because he's just escaped from jail. So that's what this is referencing. Although, like, I don't think you need to have that because Alanna is just freaked out in general. But he says that Will says Alanna is, like, doesn't trust who he is, and wonders if Hannibal is the same. And Hannibal says that he's skeptical because of all of the evidence that he's seen, like the factual evidence that he's seen. But he thinks it's very possible that Will killed Abigail. And boy, this line, Will says, if it was just Abigail, I would have believed.
I know. I was like, yes, Will, tell him.
It's so, man, I can't even talk about how much this is to me. Like, Will trusting himself to know, like, I don't trust myself in this moment, but I know for a fact, like, I wouldn't have killed these 4 people and gotten away with it. It's so huge. It's just such a moment for Will. Again, we talk about betrayal and identity and all this other stuff, and, like, betrayal of Will, like, just absolutely believing in his own self, and it's just it's a moment for me.
Yeah, I think that there's something really beautiful about that because, like, throughout the first season, like, we've seen Will so unsure of himself in so many respects, right? Letting people kind of, like, bully him in so many ways, right? Like, not standing up for himself. And here, like, when he literally has nothing left, he is actually being so true to himself. And I'm like, fuck you, Hannibal. Like, how did you manage to do this in a way that like is actually, you were right, it is making him better. And I'm just like, I hate that I agree with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I want to, at the end of this episode, I want to talk a lot about the line that was in the first episode that kind of inspired a bunch of conversation with the mongoose under the house watching for snakes.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, Rikki Tikki Tavi.
And I think we've talked a lot about Hannibal psychically driving Will to become something, to change Will in some fundamental way. And we're going to talk a lot about that towards the end of the episode as that becomes like way more clear. But I think like here too is, this moment where Hannibal is, because Will says like, I know who I am. And Hannibal says, no. Like he just straight up denies it. And it's this moment of fundamental change where he's driving Will to become something that he isn't. And Will says again, like, I don't know who, I didn't kill any of them, but I know that somebody is framing me. And Hannibal has this moment where he's like, well, let's consider how you would have killed him and start to disprove that. And then this is the moment where they both like sit down across from each other and like regular therapy resumes, as much as you can call this regular therapy, because it's nothing like my therapy at all. So.
No. Well, mine either, frankly. And I've done a lot of different kinds of therapy. None of them are like this. Yeah. But like if we can shift the focus to Hannibal in this scene for a second, because we talked a lot about Will, but like, again, like I am so, because I can't quite figure out how Hannibal's mind works and how his motivations work, I'm having a lot of trouble like really understanding what's going on for Hannibal in this moment, right? Because I don't know. I used to think of Hannibal as somebody like with a master plan, right? Like in a lot of the first season, despite you telling me the absolute opposite, right? That he's just like an extreme shit disturber and he just likes to cause chaos. And then last episode with the whole Abigail conversation, like I realized, I finally got there and I was like, oh, I see what you've been telling me this entire season that I just couldn't wrap my head around because it was so huge, right? But to see him tell Abigail, I just wanted to see how you were going to react. I was like, oh, fuck. He is much more dangerous than I thought. So I kind of wonder if he knew that like by framing Will for all of the copycats victims, like that Will was going to figure out that he didn't do it. Like, was this a master plan? Or like in this moment, is he just proud that like his boyfriend figured out the riddle kind of thing, right? Like what is actually going on in this moment? I'm not sure for Hannibal.
So I think I talked last episode about how he's definitely a chaos gremlin that has this kind of natural ability to form things into a master plan. Like he's good at both, right? Like, and he just kind of naturally does both. Here, I think that he's pushing Will in ways that he doesn't necessarily expect, because Will keeps surprising him, and that's one of the reasons that Hannibal is interested in him. Mm-hmm. So like we saw him kind of do an example of this with Franklin, right? Like he pushed Franklin a bit, but he was just terribly bored with all of Franklin's reactions. Like they were just kind of, mundane to Hannibal, versus Will, who has this like exciting ability to not only empathize with killers, but also empathize with Hannibal himself, to put himself into Hannibal's shoes, which we've seen time and time again as they've discussed the copycat killer, right? Like we've seen Hannibal be shocked and surprised that Will gets close to Hannibal's own thinking. I'm specifically like talking about that scene where they're looking at the crime scene photos in Will's office, and Hannibal is like, whoa, he got a little too close there. So stretching this out a little bit to again talk about the mongoose and the snakes, right? Like that mongoose who can absorb venom as he's fighting snakes, right? Like who can take a snake bite and still keep on killing. I wonder if this is Hannibal just pushing and pushing and pushing because he wants Will to succeed, to quote unquote succeed, to figure this out, to become changed by this, to become changed by Hannibal. And at the same time is just like also just kind of on the sidelines going, if it doesn't work out, it's going to be interesting to watch. Like it's got that dual motivation, right? Of just like, if it works, boyfriend for life. If it doesn't work, like, we'll see.
If it works, murder husband.
Yeah. If it works, murder husband.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. Again, I kind of come back to your line about like, it doesn't have to be healthy to be hot, but like this idea of like changing Will so profoundly that he becomes like wrapped up in who Hannibal also is. Like, I'm like, ooh, why do I find this hot? Like, this is not, like, I should not in any way find this hot. And yet,
you
like,
absolutely
here I am, like,
yeah.
ooh.
You absolutely, this is absolutely not supposed to be hot whatsoever.
No, but it is though, you know what I mean? Like, you know, come on, you know.
100%. Oh yeah. I'm not saying I don't. I'm just saying that you shouldn't.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Do as I say, not as I do. They sit down, and Hannibal begins to kind of walk Will through the copycat murder cases, starting with Cassie. And as he does this, as he describes them, we see visual representations of each murdered body, except now they're like coated in this like black. They're like blackened versions of the kills.
One might say a stone version, a carved version,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
A sculpted version. Yeah.
They talk about Cassie, and Hannibal says that Will could have done this to get inside Garrett Jacob Hobbs' head. Will insists that he was not there, and Hannibal is like, it was the weekend. Who knows?
I love that line so much.
Right? It's like it happened on a Saturday. Like, who knows what you were doing?
You had the weekend to do your work. I was like, oh my God, Hannibal.
The best thing about this, and that I don't know that we really get into the details on this. I don't remember if season 2 does this, but like you can imagine like Will having a lifestyle where he doesn't produce a lot of receipts a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like he's not going out on the town. Like he's spending his Saturday and Sunday like fishing by himself and with his dogs, like with no corroborating evidence that he like for his alibi whatsoever. Right? Like he can't. I caught a fish that day. Like with the lure that she used from her body. Like you know what I'm saying? Like it just has no ability
or like lounging around whorishly with
his boat bedroom. Motor. Yeah, absolutely.
With his boat motor.
Jesus Christ. Take that thing outside.
I love how angry that makes you.
Yeah, so it's so aggravating.
I'm never going to miss an opportunity to bring it up.
You're going to get oil everywhere. God, it's messy.
So messy.
As he's talking about this, he sees the what I described as the demon, but the antlered man, and he says, I know I didn't kill her. Like he's convinced that he did not kill Cassie Boyle.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Okay, so here again, like going a little bit into Will's hallucinations, like from the beginning, I've been trying to say that they've been trying to tell him something, right? Like I said, like his subconscious trying to reach out to his conscious mind. There's a line in the X-Files that I really, really love that says that like a dream is the answer to a question that you didn't know to ask yet.
I love that.
And I really feel like this applies here, right? Like I feel like this is exactly what Will's visions are trying to do for him. And in this moment, like it literally comes to a head. Literally.
Yeah, because he's seeing the killer. Right, like he's seeing the killer, or his visual representation of the killer at the crime scene, and that like blackened aspect of it too, like this stone aspect of it too, like I think it's supposed to reinforce that connection. Like if Will could just put it together, he's close. Just get it together.
So close, but again, he doesn't have all his faculties, right?
Yeah.
Like I kind of wonder, like of course the hallucinations are what gives it away, but I kind of wonder, like if he had all his faculties, would he have been able to put it together sooner if he wasn't so wrapped up in his own issues, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
They move on to Marissa, who looks so much like Abigail that Hannibal's like, why didn't you you have to wonder why Garrett Jacob Hobbs didn't kill Marissa himself. And Will has a real line like here of like where he's saying like, how could I even resist? And then they go to Sutcliffe, and again we see another blackened version of this corpse. And Hannibal says, like, this one was murdered in the same way that Will imagined himself murdering somebody just days before. And the scene is getting more and more intense. Like, it's difficult to describe because, like, the cameras are rotating around very quickly. The music is building up. And as we get to this moment, like, we see this camera, like, circling around Hannibal and circling around Will as they're, like, everything is just coming to a head, as you said. And Hannibal says, like, you catch these killers by getting into their heads, but you also allow them into your own.
I could not believe Matt's voice there because it's so different from what we had heard Hannibal's voice be before. Like, it's so much deeper and there's a growl to it. Like, it's almost like an animal. Like, it's almost like he's going for like this, like, guttural voice in this moment. And it's like, I think we've talked a lot about the actor's performance in this episode, but like truly this is like, it's amazing work. Like I'm amazed at how all of them are just giving us their best in this episode.
It's hard to believe that this is like kind of commonly known as like the second best finale in Hannibal. Like
the second best finale?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay.
Maybe even the third, like depending on who you're talking
what?
to. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't believe it.
Hannibal insists he's just trying to help Will, and Will at this point sees the antlered man directly behind, standing behind Hannibal, and he kind of wakes up. So he's at this entire time as this has been happening, he's been like wandering around the room looking at these kills. But when he wakes up, he's still just sitting in the chair, right? Like he's back to not having his visions. He comes back to reality. Mm-hmm. And he says that he wants to go to Minnesota, back to where Abigail died. He wants Hannibal to take him there. And we see a very brief scene as they're in the car together. Hannibal's driving and Will is finally catching up on some sleep. As I was looking up like different reviews and things like about this episode, just so I could like kind of get a good grip on what people were thinking about it. It was pointed out several times in multiple reviews, like the drive from Baltimore to Maryland or to Minnesota is like 17 hours. So like just write the AU, right? Like write the fanfic of what's been going on for 17 hours. Like what music were they listening to? What snacks? They get some hot Taki, and Cheetos, like hot Taki Cheetos and some, and you know what I'm saying? Like what are they getting? What are they doing for 17 hours?
I think it also 17 hours. I think it also shows like how, as weird as it sounds, like how safe Will is with Hannibal.
Right.
Which, like, fuck, what am I saying? What are those words coming out of my mouth? Like, because like,
he's finally getting rest, right? Like he's finally resting.
Sleeping. Yes, exactly. Which means that he's feeling safe enough to do that, but also that like Hannibal lets him. You know what I mean? Like he could have easily just been like, okay, let's just kill him, whatever. He could have concocted a story around that, but no. Oh my God.
Notably, and in line with that, we see Will sleeping and he's not sweating during it, right? Like, which is normally the thing that we see him. It's just he's pouring sweat while he's sleeping and having visions. Meanwhile, Jack and Alanna arrive at Bedelia's incredibly like fucking stunting on him house. Like, I just can't believe this house. It's amazing and gorgeous. And they're looking for Hannibal, and she says, well, he missed his appointment today, which he would have considered rude, which is a great callback to, Will missing his appointment with Hannibal back in a few episodes ago.
Right. I love Bedelia so much.
She's so great. She's so gorgeous.
I love her.
And Alanna is like, they're worried that Will has taken Hannibal hostage and has taken him to Minnesota. And Alanna is worried that like Will is slipping in and out of his delusions and could potentially kill Hannibal. And Bedelia says if anyone can help Will, it would be Hannibal. He may even still be trying. The
thing is,
what does she know?
I think that Bedelia and Hannibal have a very different definition of what helping means than we do, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, he might still be trying to help Bedelia, but that's not exactly what you want in this moment, right?
Will arrives. We see Will arriving at the Hobbs house, and he has a vision of himself entering the kitchen, but this time he's in Garrett Jacob Hobbs' place as Abigail gets the phone call that we saw in the first episode and hands it to him. And the voice on the other line is Hannibal saying, Will, wake up. Will, wake up. And he does so in the car. And now it's nighttime. They go into the house, and the next few scenes are going to be intercut with memories that Will has. So as he goes inside, he remembers Abigail like going through her stuff and asking if they were going to reenact the crime, saying that, I can be, the victim. And she points to Will, you can be my dad. And she points to Hannibal and like, you could be the person on the phone. As Will remembers this, he looks at Hannibal and asks the same question. Do we need to reenact the crime? And Hannibal just looks at him and says, if that would help you.
I feel like Will here is kind of doing the same thing to Hannibal than Hannibal is doing to him, to a much different degree, granted, right? But like he wants to see how Hannibal is going to react under pressure. Like he's trying to push Hannibal very inefficiently, I would argue, but like he is trying to do that, I think.
I think so too. I think it's at this moment that we could probably realize that Will suspects Hannibal, right? Like we're not going to know that for sure until just a few minutes from now. But like this is the point where I was like, he has been sensing something was going on, and now we're here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was like, oh, he knows.
He knows. They walk into the kitchen and they see this huge blood stain on the floor, which is Abigail's. He talks about the telltale arterial spray. Will says it's as if Abigail was supposed to die in this kitchen. And Hannibal points out that they haven't found the body yet, and that they may never will if Will killed her in the way that Hobbs did. And Will just asks, I honored every part of her. And I think this is a pretty startling revelation, because like the idea, I think there's some part of us that can accept the idea of like Will potentially killing Abigail. But the fact that there's not even a body and that everybody has been blaming her death on him. Like I know the ear is a thing, but like also there's no body. And we know like that Hannibal probably did something very gruesome to the body. Like we don't want to talk about it just yet, but like it's probably pretty bad. But like the idea that everybody believes that Will disappeared this chick is crazy to me.
I know, right? I feel like anyway, I think it's one of those things where like I know the physical evidence is there. It was clearly planted. We know that. But also like use your fucking judgment. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway.
He as they go into the kitchen, Hannibal wonders out loud if Will came to this room not looking for a killer but to find himself. Because after all, he was the killer in this room. He killed Garrett Jacob Hobbs in this room.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there you go. And I think like Hannibal is recognizing that Will is trying to put pressure, and so he's pushing back, right? Like he's putting more and more pressure on Will to see how he's going to react to all of this, right? Like this is like Hannibal is lit up in this moment.
Absolutely.
Like, he is like excited about what's going on.
It's kind of like the gloves are off a little bit too, right? Like he feels like he is, and I love that you pointed out that like Will is maybe kind of starting to put that same kind of pressure back on Hannibal, because I think at this moment Hannibal doesn't necessarily realize that. I think he believes that Will is firmly in his grasp, and that he's pushing Will to become something different, to change Will, and like he's not doing it in much of a subtle way as he's been doing it before. Now he's like really actively doing it. Will has an absolutely incredible line where he says that as he walked in the kitchen, he stared at Hobbs, and the space opposite of me assumed the shape of a man filled with dark and swarming flies, and then I scattered them. And I feel like he's talking about Garrett Jacob Hobbs, because he saw this man who had committed crimes, and he shot him and he scattered all these flies.
Yeah, for sure. I have a note there where I'm like, is he talking about Hannibal? Just because I know he's talking about Hobbs. But there's also a part of me that's like, are you seeing the shape of a man filled with something dark and swarming in Hannibal right now? Like, are you there? Are you in that moment where you're seeing who Hannibal really is, Because
that could also
I just kind of wonder.
That dark and swarming flies line could also be used to describe like the man stag or the antlered man, right? Like I think that's
the demon man.
And Hannibal says Will is now understanding his own aloneness, his loneliness.
Right, Will's loneliness, right? And I love that Will replies, I'm not as alone as you are. Like, I'm just, again, like so amazed at how Will can hold his own in this situation. Because again, like Will is starting to see who Hannibal really is. He's like, oh shit, like you have no one, right?
And when I mentioned the gloves coming off, here it's just absolute direct, where Hannibal says that if Will would have followed the urges that he ignored and instead cultivated them, he would have become something other than himself. And he's literally like on Will's left shoulder, the sinister shoulder, if you will, as he's like, he's literally the devil on Will's shoulder as he's talking about this, like pushing him to become something else or to believe that he is something else.
I also love that Will is not having any of that, right? I kind of love that, because I think like in this kind of dark, very dark storytelling style and horror genre, like I think you can have killers who are doing good things, quote unquote, right? Like I think it's easy to kind of like frame that. And I think Will is like, I might have killed, but I didn't kill for pleasure kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I killed out of necessity. And I don't know, like I just love this moment of Will standing up for himself and being like, this is not who I am. As we know, in the Supernatural fandom, we have a very, very important moment where that happens. And yeah, it speaks to me. This is not who I am.
Absolutely.
Right? Or I know who I am kind of thing.
And, you know, I think it's important that we acknowledge that, like, Will has been struggling with this all season, right? Like, that's the thing that he went to Hannibal to talk about to begin with, was the idea that he could possibly enjoy having killed Garrett Jacob Hobbs, right? Like, this idea of him taking a human life, the ugliest thing in the world, which he later corrected to one of the ugliest things in the world, could that he could do that he was capable of doing such a thing, and Hannibal seizing on that and kind of pushing him to try to do it again, right? And Will insists, like, I know who I am, but I'm not so sure who you are anymore. And this is the moment that, like, we're like, oh shit. And Will says, but I am certain that one of us killed Abigail, and whoever that was killed the others.
And, like, that's the thing, right? Because Will knows that he didn't kill the others. So, therefore, he can safely say that, or conclude that he didn't kill Abigail. But Hannibal sure did.
100%. And as Will draws his gun, Hannibal doesn't even flinch. He's like, are you a killer, Will? Is this who you really are? And I find this really, really amazing, because this is what Hannibal has been pushing for, is to convince or to somehow drive Will to kill in cold blood, right? To kill someone outside of the bounds of, like, you know, he was a serial killer or whatever. Like, because Hannibal's not threatening him at any point, right? Like, he doesn't have a knife to a girl's throat. He's not, like, he's just calmly taking the situation in. So if he pulls the trigger, that makes Will a killer, which is basically Hannibal's goal at this point.
Yes. Yeah. And like, again, like, this is Hannibal's moment. Like, he is just like, this is going to show me who Will is. Like, I am going to see if all the work that I put into making this man, quote unquote, better, who he really is, if this is going to pay off, if I was right or if I was wrong.
And Will responds, I am who I've always been. Scales have just fallen from my eyes. I can see you now. And this is obviously like a biblical reference of the scale falling from his eyes. But,
oh, really?
Yeah. Samson?
Yeah, you're gonna have to tell me about that.
Yeah,
I have no idea. I was never raised with the Bible.
I don't want to use the fucking AI thing that Google does now. It was Saul. This is a moment that, like, right before he became baptized, before he took Jesus, basically. And I don't remember exactly the whole story. It's been a while since Bible school for me.
What?
It's been like, it's been a solid 30 years of atheism. So I don't remember. I do remember it was Saul. But yeah, I remember, like, the scales fell from his eyes and he accepted, like, the Lord in his heart. He accepted the truth, right? I think that's probably what we can take from it.
Interesting that it's this idea of, like, accepting the Lord, and, like, in this case, like, the Lord is Hannibal. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't want to be blasphemous or anything, but, like, it's just,
no, let's be blasphemous. Let's get into it. Yeah, Hannibal is God. I mean, we've talked a lot.
I think so.
Right?
I think he sees himself as God.
Exactly. Like, you've mentioned that several times throughout the season, and I think that, like, this is probably a reference to that. And man, this whole scene is just so fucking crazy.
The tension. Like, I talk about the tension a lot. This is just, like, so much. I just can't deal with it. Like, I had the number of times that I had to pause this episode and go, like, walk around my around my apartment, like, just around my kitchen island, like, just in circles, like a rat or something.
Yes, 100%.
Oh my God.
Will accuses Hannibal of calling Garrett Jacob Hobbs that day, and says that Abigail has been protecting him. And he says, "Are you a murderer, Dr. Lecter?" Like, switching that question. I think it's interesting that Hannibal asked Will if he was a killer, and Will switches it to murderer. I think there's, like, a very subtle difference in words there, and subtle difference in definitions. And Hannibal, who is, like, the king of never saying anything about himself if he doesn't have to, just says, "What motive would I have?"
And I kind of love that, because he doesn't deny it, right? Like, he's putting the burden of proof on Will. And this is classic narcissist behavior, right? Like he's just like, why would I do this? Right? Like if you accused me of being a murderer, I'd be like, what the fuck? No, of course not. Like I would deny it. I'd be like, no. My first question wouldn't be like, what motive would I have? You know what I mean? Like that's just so yeah, just yeah.
Will is at this point, we've seen Will unstable throughout, I think, all of this. And this point he's having trouble like breathing. He's like gasping for air. Like his blood pressure is probably through the roof at this point. Like he's obviously whether or not he was having these beliefs, whether or not he formed these beliefs on the way over here, or it was just as he entered the Hobbs house that he started figuring everything out. Like this revelation, this betrayal, if you will, has affected him physically, where he's literally gasping for air.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, he is spot on, right? Because he says, like, you have no discernible motive, which is why you were so hard to see, which is a very important word, right? As we know, you know, and he says, you were just curious what I would do. Someone like me who thinks how I think, wind them up and watch them go. And I'm so sorry for just like quoting direct lines of dialogue. But this is just too good. We had to keep it.
Mary, I do that like 15 times every episode. Like you're fine. Please do that so I don't look like so much like a fool.
But because it's just so good. Like, what else are you going to do? And I think like Hannibal in this moment, like he's not smiling, but like his eyes are just like, I don't know what Mads is doing in this moment, but it's just like Hannibal is like, yes, finally someone who sees me. You know, like I don't think Hannibal, again, like talking about his loneliness, he's like, oh yes, I've made a friend, like a connection. Maybe this is what Bedelia meant when she says that he is removed from the concept, right? He doesn't understand what a friend is and he thinks that this is it. And I'm like, oh honey.
Oh no. Like, oh no. Yeah. You guys should just be eating chicken wings and watching Marvel movies together. Like that's what a friendship is. Like this is not it at all.
Yeah.
Will says, like, apparently Dr. Lecter, this is how I go, because he's, he just had to wind them up and watch them go line. And during this conversation, Jack has managed to get to the house, and he's been creeping up, so he's been listening to part of this conversation. And as Will holds the gun up to shoot Will, in this moment where he's going to become a killer, Jack warns him to not to shoot. And as Will holds the gun up, Jack shoots him in the arm. And Will falls in, just so happens, the same place that Garrett Jacob Hobbs fell.
Jesus Christ.
And as he looks up and he sees Jack and Hannibal standing over him, he says, see. And then Will sees himself because he sees the demon in the place of Hannibal. And if you didn't know for sure that Hannibal was the antlered man or the man stag or the raven stag or whatever, the nightmare deer or whatever you want to call it, the nightmare moose or whatever.
Nightmare deer. Sorry, I love that.
This is the moment that it all comes to play, like where you realize, like, nope, that's the guy.
I kind of hate that this is really the only time that Jack actually does something good for Will. And I want to be careful because I don't mean to say that law enforcement shooting innocent people is a good thing, right? Yeah. Like, not at all. This is not where I'm going. But this is like the one time, like, Jack actually stops Will from murdering in cold blood. And I'm like, I cannot believe that this is the shape that Jack caring for Will actually takes.
Yes.
Like, I'm actually kind of mad about that.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. And then we jump ahead a little bit. Will is in the hospital, Jack at his side, and Hannibal has arrived. Hannibal has, throughout this season, it's been kind of fascinating to me that Hannibal, does he have like a medical fucking power of attorney for Will, that he can just go talk to the nurses and doctors and know everything that's going on with Will's diagnosis? Because every time it's like it's like Hannibal telling Will or telling Jack everything that's going on with Will. It's just funny. But
maybe that's what happened during the 17 hours. Maybe
they signed a lot of paperwork.
They signed a lot of paperwork, and Hannibal was on the phone with his notary. I don't know.
But they are finally treating Will's inflamed brain, and he's expected to make a full recovery.
Finally. Jesus Christ.
Jack wonders if Hannibal would have gone with Will if Will did not have a gun. And Hannibal says, I would have wanted to. I believe that I have failed to satisfy my obligation to Will. To which Jack responds, well, he is not your victim, doctor.
But isn't he, though?
And Hannibal responds, nor is he yours.
Isn't he, though? Like, let's not do this, boys. Like, And I just, again, like you talked about how much we hate a liar. And like, this is again, like, because the conversation is not even hinting, but it's basically telling the viewer that Hannibal said that, oh, well, I had to go because he had a gun on me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not so much he had a gun, it's like he had a gun on me. And I'm like, motherfucking liar, you know? Like, I just, like, I can excuse the murdering.
But I would draw the line.
I draw the line on lying and gaslighting. Oh, God.
Jack says that over the years he's seen people broken. He's seen broken people, but nothing like what Will is now. And Hannibal just responds that no one in this room will be the same, which is very ominous coming from Hannibal, considering we're setting up for a season 2 now.
Right.
And later that night, Hannibal arrives at Bedelia's house. She's wearing a red dress.
Of course, she is, of course.
And he has brought food, a smoky veal dish that she says smells like a bonfire.
She calls it an unexpected treat.
Yeah, and you get the sense that he's kind of forced this, because he says he thanks her for having him over for dinner, but then makes a reference to her not attending his dinner table. So this is the only way that he can cook for her. And again, like, what does she know? What does she know?
I think she knows everything.
He tells her that he's going to see Will the next day, but it's not to rehabilitate or anything, but it's to say a farewell. And
of sorts.
And she mentions that
Jesus Christ.
Will almost cost him his own life, but it definitely cost Abigail her life.
Mm.
And then
Cut to.
And then he like looks at her and is like, "Your veal is getting cold."
Oh my God!
What is this? What does this
the nausea
mean?
that I feel right now.
What does this mean? Bedelia comments that veal is a very controversial dish, and then with an extreme amount of import, she cuts off a piece of veal and looks him directly in the eye and takes a small bite. And like, what does she know? What does she know?
The thing is, like, she enjoys it, right? She's like, And first of all, like, watching Gillian Anderson eat this dish, I was like, oh my God, like, oh, like, I'm like, I should not like this as much as I do. But like, the scream that I screamed, because she's in on it, right? Like, she knows she's one. She's a cannibal. Like, please let her also be a serial killer. Please, Brian Fuller. Please let her be mean.
Do you want to see her in the little plastic suit that Hannibal wears and just like murdering some folks?
Maybe. I don't want to say what I'm thinking, because I think that would reveal a little too much about me. But I kind of want her to be like the mastermind, like telling people what to do. You know what I mean? Like, I would like that. I would like that very much.
archive.varon.com/Marie.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Whew. Oh my God, I'm like. Okay, let's move on.
Hannibal defends veal, saying that most of the time people take exception because of the age that the animals are killed, but it's also like no older than what pigs are slaughtered as. And she kind of ignores this and says that he needs to be careful. They are starting to see your pattern. You develop relationships with patients who are prone to violence. And he kind of takes this in. Like, you can kind of tell, like, he's not worried, but he's like, maybe she's right a little bit.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And it's like, is she like his mentor? Like, because this warning is not about Hannibal's like professional life. Like, right. It's not about his therapy, like, very clearly. Like, it's about his little cooking side hustle. And it's like, I need to know who Bedelia is. You know,
so I want to talk about this developing relationships with patients who are prone to violence, because we saw this with a little bit with Franklin. And we obviously have seen this with Will to an extreme.
Yes.
We also saw this with Abigail, who he was also kind of mentoring, if you will, to become a serial killer, to embrace her violent side. And we know some facts about what happened to Bedelia. The fact that the person who attacked Bedelia was his patient, that Hannibal referred this patient to Bedelia, and that somehow later this patient swallowed his own tongue in the middle of the attack, and that Hannibal is implied to have been there. We don't know for certain, but Bedelia implied this.
We don't know who was there, basically.
So this
is what Bedelia tells us.
So this pattern that he's like kind of pushing people, he's psychically driving people to embrace their violent nature and to become more violent. And then to relate that back to the mongoose thing about the mongoose protecting the house from snakes, because Will is the first killer that he's found that kills killers, right? Like that Will is the person to catch these people. He's the one protecting the house from the quote-unquote snakes, which you would consider Hannibal a snake, although I think if you asked Hannibal about the metaphor, he would consider himself above, as living in the house, right? He wouldn't consider himself a snake.
100%. Yes.
So, and I think that's one of the many reasons that Hannibal finds Will so fascinating, is because he's a person who can get inside these people, and it's the first person he's ever encountered that can do the same thing he does, except Will does it naturally. It just happens for him, right? We rewatched WandaVision recently. And there's a moment where one of the villains tells Wanda, like, it took me years of study to do like what you can just do without even thinking, right? Like she's just such a natural, she's naturally gifted with magic. And that's kind of the separation between Hannibal and Will to a degree. And I think why Hannibal finds himself so fascinated with Will.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you think about it, like there's, especially the way that like Hannibal likes to portray himself, right? Like the way that he dresses, the way that he cooks, the company that he keeps, his hobbies, etc. Like you can tell that he is aspiring, or that he is a part of a completely different class than Will, right?
Yes.
Socioeconomically. And yet he's seeing like this man who was like raised poor and who like doesn't have as much education as he doesn't have as much taste as he does, being able to match him in any way, shape, or form, I think must be unsettling for him. And we're we're naturally fascinated by what unsettles us, right? Like there's an attraction there of like, oh, like we're doing the same thing almost, except you're coming at this from a completely different angle. Like, how are you doing this? I need to unravel you, right? And to bring that, like, just to, because Bedelia literally warns about Jack's belief unraveling under scrutiny, and he wonders if Bedelia's beliefs have begun to unravel about him, which is where the scene ends. And it's a lot. Everything's gonna be fine though. Next season's great. I feel like this is one of those things also where, like, if Bedelia knows about Hannibal, then Hannibal also knows about Bedelia, and so they're keeping each other's secret, and like it's mutually assured destruction if one of them talks, right? You know what I mean? So like there's a very strong incentive not to say what you know about this person, because otherwise they're gonna tell all of your secrets, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that this like sets the table, for sets the scene, but sets the table, I'm gonna say, for a potential power play between Bedelia and Hannibal, which I would love to see happening.
It's also a mature version of the relationship that Hannibal was developing with Abigail, where they were keeping one another's secrets, right? Even though Abigail was obviously playing like far, far out of her depth, it seems like Bedelia knows much more about Hannibal than Abigail could have realized.
Well, remember when I said that like Abigail doesn't have the age or the sophistication to be able to understand? Bedelia has that.
Absolutely.
Bedelia knows.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Our last scene is Hannibal entering the Baltimore Institute for the Criminally Insane. And he enters, and you can tell that he kind of closes his eyes for a moment, and he like smells Will from down the hall.
He's such a little creep. I love him.
And he slowly walks to Will's cell, and he says, "Hello, Will." And as the music swells, Will stands up in his little jumpsuit and looks at him and says, "Hello, Dr. Lecter." And the camera settles on Hannibal as he like smiles, just a little tight, like almost a smirk, and that's where we go to credits.
So I have a question, because again, not knowing anything about this franchise, the one thing that I said actually at the beginning that I know about Hannibal is the whole like "Hello, Clarice" thing, right? Like that was the only thing that I knew. Is this moment that but reversed? Because like in this Is that what happens? Is that why it's so powerful?
100%. Yeah, this is the great moment of Clarice seeing Hannibal Lecter for the first time. Except it's reversed, as you said, because Hannibal Lecter is not in the cage. Even down to like the plexiglass, like the way that the cell looks. Like they are very specifically. Even more so, the music that is playing is like this opera that was specifically composed for the movie Hannibal.
No.
Yes, absolutely. That they are now using in this the TV show Hannibal. And in fact, there's a reference on the wiki, and I'll have to remember to bring this up later, where the lyrics were inspired by Dante Alighieri's sonnets, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce. But Hannibal is going to quote it in a later episode of I think in season 3.
Oh my god!
So just loops within loops within loops with references within references. And I think
they're so clever.
They're so good. Yeah. And again, like talking about like knowing that Brian Fuller like wanted this to be the ending thing, right? Like wanted this to be the season finale, wanted this to be the last thing that you saw, I think is really important. And even without that, so like if you remove all of references to like Hannibal and pop culture or any of the movies or TV shows or anything that have come before, this moment where they're looking at each other possibly for the first time with full realization of the other, where Will, having been treated for his fever, is now thinking clearly for maybe the first time in months, and seeing Hannibal and evaluating Hannibal on a completely different level than he ever has before. And Hannibal seeing Will make those connections and wondering how and what Will is going to do, wondering how Will is going to react to that knowledge, right? And then, of course, like going back to our theme, like the ultimate betrayal of, I thought you were my friend and you put me in a fucking criminally insane hospital. Like, what a moment. Just overall, just what an incredible moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think like, especially the way that Will is greeting Hannibal in this moment. It's like, oh, you fucked me over? Wait until you see what I have in store for you, kind of thing. And I'm just like, ooh.
What could be happening in season 2?
Oh, man, I'm so excited.
It's so good. Yeah, just I can't, it's hard to imagine a better ending for season 1. As someone that was a massive fan of Hannibal going into this when it was airing, and was so dramatically knocked out of my comfort zone by just how different it was from everything that had come before, and how easy it would have been to find somebody to just basically do Anthony Hopkins.
Yes.
Which Mads Mikkelsen specifically said, like, I don't want to do Brian Cox. I don't want to do Anthony Hopkins. Brian Cox was in the movie Manhunter. He played Hannibal.
Okay.
Very specifically, I don't want to like adopt those kind of performances. Just absolutely incredible ending. Just like I just wanted so much more. I was like, give me all of the next season right now, please. I need it immediately.
Well, that's the thing, like, because this was during this is in 2013. So yes, it was a short season. Like that was like the time that they were experimenting with those short seasons. But it was also the time where like seasons came out every year, right? Yes. So that, that blessed time where seasons came out every year. I feel 1 million years old, Jeremy, saying this.
Well, no, I mean, like, it wasn't until, like, Game of Thrones where it's like, oh, Game of Thrones is going to come out, like, the next season is going to come out in 4 years, and it's 8 episodes, right? Like, up until then, it felt like, it's, network TV. Like, we'll be back next fall, basically. So.
We'll be back next fall. So you knew that you were going to get, and I think at this point, like, people knew that they had been renewed, right? They were renewed, like, immediately. We knew that there was going to be a second season, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think I've read that.
Yeah, okay. Yes. I think you said something about, like, how even before they finished the pilot, they knew they were going to get a second season, that they had been renewed or something like that. Like it was immediate almost.
I know they approved the show for season 1, like without even finishing the pilot. Okay. I'm pretty sure like by the ratings were so good, like during the middle, they were like, yes, you're doing a second season. So
okay, great. Okay. Because I can only imagine being a fan watching this and having to wait a whole fucking year. Like I had trouble waiting a week. Like this was hard. This last week has been really hard for me. Like, I think I was like, I don't want to flippantly compare it to torture, but like,
but it does feel kind of torture. Yeah. It's not torture, but it's torturous, right? Like it is the feeling of being tortured. Absolutely.
Exactly. So like, I can only imagine like having to wait a whole year to be able to see season 2, episode 1, right? Like, so Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, this is so good. This is so good. And I don't know. I kind of wonder, like, what were the fan theories at that time? Like, I know that. So we are, again, like, to give a look behind the glass, like, we are behind the veil, the human veil. This is October 20th. We're recording this on October 20th. This episode is going to come out on January 19th, which is bonkers. So we have a lot of time, and I kind of wonder, like, should we dedicate a little bit of time to talking to fans who were watching this at the time? Like, what were the fan theories? What was the fandom like at that time, right? Like, I'm so fascinated with fandom history.
Yes.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to do that. I'll try to find people who were watching.
I know there's some people on the Mods of the Week server that definitely were like,
oh, cool,
were in the trenches, right? Like, they were definitely there. And I know there's some listeners out there that were the same way, and we could put a call out on Twitter to find those people. And I would
love to do that.
Definitely down for setting up a series of quick interviews and talking to people and seeing what their reactions were at the time. Because I am also very fascinated with fandom culture and history.
I know.
Reading interviews at the time, Brian Fuller did kind of a tour of interviews about the end of season 1. And one of the big questions is, like, what are they going to do to Jack? Right? Like, what? Like, his judgment was so obviously off at this point that he's got a serial killer working for him and helping him solve cases.
Right.
And Brian Fuller plays it extremely cool and is like, well, maybe we will deal with that in season 2. And he's just like very much like, I'm not going to give away anything.
I feel like Brian Fuller is just as much as a diva as Hannibal is, but like in a completely different way, in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, I love that about him.
It's also kind of heartbreaking because in some of those interviews, and I haven't shared a lot of that stuff with you because some of it's like spoilerific, but I've told you that they didn't have rights for like Silence of the Lambs because it was owned by MGM. And so they weren't able to use like specific characters that came from there, like Clarice Starling. But his goal was to set up seasons 4 and 5 to eventually be able to, like, his goal was like, this show was so popular, like, that MGM wants to give us those characters and allow us to do our versions of those stories. So it's
why was it canceled?
I mean, I don't know at the time. I don't know what official reasons were given, but I think probably somebody at NBC took over and was like, this is the bloodiest fucking show on primetime. Like, we can't be doing this. Like, maybe it was an effort to get back to like family oriented programming or some bullshit. So, and it was teased a lot. I feel like this was before you saw like really, well, no, because Firefly got that movie, and that was probably around the same. That was way earlier than this, actually. Like, there's been shows that like had like grassroots campaigns. I know they tried to do that with Hannibal, and just for whatever reason it never happened. So
that's what I was gonna say. I'm like, it was so massively popular. I'm surprised that it wasn't picked up by another network. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's so strange to me. Anyway, I haven't seen like the next 2 seasons, but like,
maybe
I know that people still talk about a season 4. You know?
Maybe you'll hate them. That could be a thing that happens.
Sure, maybe.
Do you have any final thoughts on the episode before we go to our review section?
I think that was it. I think that was what I'm wondering is like, what did fans think at the time? Because I know what I'm thinking, but like, it's not, like, it's not the same. And I want to be very cognizant of that like, I'm watching it in a way that like people at the time were not watching it the same way.
Sure.
And I very much like respect that experience of like watching it in real time, like with other people. And I'm so curious about that experience.
So if we don't reach out to you to get you on the podcast directly, you can always write in because we're going to have a feedback episode, so you can tell us your thoughts. It'll come out 2 weeks from when you're listening to this, presumably. Even though that we're going to record it so far in the future, it's going to be ridiculous. But please send
we need to talk about that.
Yeah, we do. We need to figure out exactly how that's going to work.
You and I need to have a chat.
But in the meantime, it's rooteatspodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit us on Twitter, and we also have a Blue Sky now, right? You did some work this weekend. Yeah,
I did. Well, it's honestly, it's because, again, October 20th, the blocking thing on Twitter is happening, like the change of the block. And apparently that's not a thing that can happen in Canada. So I may very well be blocked out of Twitter altogether. Yeah. So there you go.
Interesting times for sure on the internet as Elon Musk continues to ruin the Twitter brand. But regardless, send us your thoughts. We would appreciate it. We're going to be right back with our reviews. Mary, why don't you start us off with your review?
So I'm going to give this episode all of the stars because it was an unexpected way to close the first chapter of this well-known story. And this unforgettable savoureux packed some serious flavors in such a small bite. Smoky, salty, bitter, and a promise of what's to come.
And I'm going to give this episode every one of the stars that I have available to me. It was an incredible bite at the end of an incredible meal that served up surprising flavors, in-depth textures, and amazing entrees. It's hard to imagine what could possibly follow after this.
And friends, we have been recording for almost 3 hours at this point.
We're going to very quickly tell you that we appreciate you. Thank you for commenting on Spotify and leaving Apple reviews. We very much appreciate that. Thank you for continuing to comment on our Twitter and talk to us in our various Discords about things. Reach out to us if you have opinions about season 1 and you want us to talk about them. And we will see you very soon for season 2.
And in the meantime, bon appétit, everybody.
Bon appétit.
Because I was actually late compared to the time I had given you earlier.
One of the old sales guys I used to work with used to say that if we're not 15 minutes early, we're late. And I was like, that's a lot of stress, my man.
That is a lot of stress. So my son and I have this argument all the time because he's like, because he wants to be early for birthday parties. And I'm like, actually, no, you don't want to be early for birthday parties because being one of the people who has to organize birthday parties, oftentimes, like when you go to like a kid's venue, you only get like 15 minutes to like organize the room, decorate the room or whatever, right? And so like those 15 minutes are fucking precious.
And the last thing you want to deal with is like 11-year-olds in there while you're trying to set everything up, right?
Honestly, it's not so much the 11-year-olds. Those I can deal with. It's the parents who want to chat. And like, fuck, man. Like, just drop off your kid. Like,
yeah. Just give me your child and leave. God, what is
Yes, exactly. Give me your child for like the agreed upon 2 to 3 hours. And then we're good to go. So yeah, okay, so I am recording, Zencastr is doing its thing, and I have my thing open, so that's great.
Excellent. Well prepared this morning.
I know, right?
I'm good. I'm chilling, just here, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I'm happy about that. Happy that you're here.
I'm also trying to look for the link for all of the scripts because I forgot to put something in the notes. And so I was distracted while I was telling you that. I'm good. This week has been was I mean, it's kind of rough with the medical stuff, but otherwise okay. And just doing the thing. So I'm today I'm recording with Chris. We'll talk about the X-Files. Finally a good episode in season 2.
Which episode is that you're going to talk about?
It's the one where the Romanian kid is possessed by his twin brother, his dead twin brother. It's just like
so good.
It's just The Exorcist, right? Like it's just The Exorcist, but it's so good.
I know. That's the thing. I find that when the X-Files does something well, they do it really well, right? Like, yeah. It's kind of nice.
It's so I'm doing that, and then at 3:00 or 4:00 your time, I'm going to stream.
There's a fun thing going on.
Yeah, I'm going to stream the Twilight movie with our commentary on top of it, which I've never done before. I've never tried to make that work. So hopefully Discord doesn't completely fucking break. It worked this morning.
It should be fine.
Yeah.
I have never seen Twilight before.
We've talked about this. Yeah, this is probably not the way to watch Twilight.
Because when I saw the announcement, you're going to stream Twilight, I was like, well, I guess this is the way to do it. And then when you're like with the commentary, I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, especially because the way that Hunky Sundays work out, pretty much everybody that's in there is on the microphone, so everyone's just kind of talking over
shit.
it. Like,
yeah, okay.
We choose Hunky Sundays has always been choose a trashy movie to watch, right? And then we can all talk over it or something. Which is a good time unless you're trying to pay attention to the movie at all. And then
unless you've never seen the movie, kind of thing.
Yeah, and then I just get too stressed out to exist. So.
Oh. Oh my god, it's going to be so much fun to see. Well, I mean, I don't think I'll attend this one, but if you do another Hunky Sunday, then I would love to be there.
Okay. I'll add you to. So we created a role, so that when we just tag the role. So we're not doing like an at everybody kind of all the time. It's just anybody who wants to opt into the Hunky Sunday thing. So, and there's no obligation or anything. You just get a notification whenever we haven't done it in like fucking months. So,
yeah, I'd love that. Actually,
props to the people.
You should make another announcement to people, like, because I didn't know about this at all.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll do that a little bit later.
Let the new people know.
Yeah, I guess we do have a bunch of new people, so maybe I'll
like let the new people know, Jeremy.
Let them know.
I love how I'm like involving myself in your Patreon that I have nothing to do with.
Yes, please do. Please do. You deserve it.
Oh my god.
I need the help.
I listen. I'm always happy to offer advice, but I also understand that sometimes unsolicited advice sucks. So, like,
The thing that I've always read is never take advice from someone you wouldn't ask. What does the phrase go? Never take advice from someone that you wouldn't ask criticism from. I think something like that. Like if you wouldn't specifically ask them for something, then like don't take advice from them. And I would always ask you for criticism. Like I feel like you're a good person to be like, oh yeah, this is. I could trust you to be like, tell me the truth about something, right? Like I think you would just be like, oh yeah, it's this and this and this and this. So
yeah. Well, here's my unsolicited advice. You should definitely let people know about Hunky Sundays who may not have known about it before, especially if you'd only tag certain people for it. Just a reminder every once in a while. It's always nice.
I have a feeling that people mute the announcements channel, which is rude.
Oh, you're so rude, but I so get it because I think I did that.
Of course, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. You're one of the people.
I am one of the people. Oh my god, hold on. No, announcements is there. It's there. Oh, it's because it's a bot. That's why.
Yeah. It's just like I sometimes I put stuff in there, but like
yes, there you go. That's the issue.
Yeah,
is that like we miss it? But to be honest, we do the same on the Carrying Wayward like announcement thing. We have a bot for the episodes, which honestly I don't think is a good idea because it's for us anyway, because then it means that like when we put stuff in the announcement ourselves, like nobody pays attention.
Yeah, I guess
nobody pays attention.
I never really thought about it that way, but you're right. Like if you set the precedent that that's bots only, then
yes,
then people are just gonna be like, oh, that's a bot, I can ignore it. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I realized that the other day when I was trying to announce something, and I was like, shit, nobody's paying attention. I was like, I can't blame them. Like.
That's when you got to do that at everybody. Everybody gets the notification.
I know. We try to do that like as little as possible. But then then we've also had people who were like upset that they've missed certain events and they were like, oh my God. And I was like, well, I just didn't want to tag like everybody because that's kind of rude. But then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll start doing that. But anyway, it feels weird.
At a certain point, like how much notification do you need? Like I put it in the Patreon email.
Yeah.
Like I'm putting it on the Discord, which not all of our patrons are in the Discord, but like, I don't know. Like,
but the ones who are mostly active usually are there, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Like you're not going to watch it?
No. I'm just going to set this up and like go hang out with my wife and watch TV. Like I'm setting this up to be. I'm going to be a bot in the channel, and like I'll be watching the text channel. So like if people have problems or whatever, I can just run it to the back and get it. But like I set it up so that it's just going to run through. Like it's going to be streaming via my microphone or whatever, but like quote unquote microphone. But like it's just going to be the commentary, so I don't have to actually do anything. So it's going to be nice.
I love that. Yeah. That is amazing.
Already suffered through Twilight once. I don't need to do it again.
So what I'm hearing is that it's a masterpiece that you would love to watch again,
God.
right?
That's what I'm hearing. So incredible. just an amazing feat of cinema. Just super good. I will say the thing I liked the most about Twilight was the cinematography, like the locale, I guess.
Yes.
That Washington kind of that Washington State area it's just beautiful, and they put that blue filter on it, so everything looks great. It looks like you're in purgatory the entire time. So
that's what I've been told actually, that like it looks really beautiful, and I'm just like, okay, that's cool. And it's so funny because like both Robert Pattinson and Kirsten. What's her name? Stewart. There you go. Asking you for the name of an actor is probably not the way to go. That's okay. I got myself out of that hole. yeah, both of them just like became like really good actors. Like, you know, when I see their names on a movie, I know that the movie's going to be good, like regardless of anything else. But like, I've seen bits and pieces of Twilight, and I'm like, this is just not.
Yeah. I feel like
that seems like I would like it.
I've seen both of them like pretty much hate on all of the Twilight movies. Like I feel like that was their kind of big break into doing movies, and then similar to what's his name, Harry Potter, where that dude is just like, I'm just gonna make a bunch of weird shit. Like I'm not. I'm gonna go pretend to be Weird Al Yankovic in a documentary about him. Like like he's got Harry Potter money. He can say fuck you to the world.
He can do whatever he wants. Yeah, I love that. I love that now he's doing Broadway, like theater and whatnot. Like I don't know. I love it when people do like get one really big commercial thing and then they just spend the rest of their career doing whatever the fuck they want. Like I just find that so cool.
God, I wish it were me.
Honestly, same.
God, I wish it were me.
I want to do weird shit.
Imagine settling like one thing for, $1 billion and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to do podcasts for the rest of my life. Like exactly. I'm just going to sit around and do podcasts with anybody who wants to. Yeah. I'm gonna pay Chris and Mary and Gary a salary to do podcasts with me. Like, this is gonna be a job. I'm gonna set up a corporation.
I would love that. I know that there's grants out there to do certain types of things, and so like I don't know. I've been really reluctant to apply because like, what if we don't get it? But then it's like, but what if we do? So I don't know. I think 2025 is going to be the year of trying to apply for like actual money to do stuff. So we'll see.
I'm curious if any of that stuff exists in the US. Like I've never heard of anybody getting a grant to
do podcasts. I mean, it depends on the kind of podcasts, right? Like I know that for audio dramas, there's some stuff because it counts as art, right? It counts as art. And so like you're eligible for a bunch of art grants. So that's what we're kind of looking at with a couple other people.
Interesting.
So yeah.
I'm excited to see more, to hear more.
I know, me too. So it'll be fun.
I had such huge plans to do like a weird ARG thing with the outtakes and the X-Files. And then chemo happened, and I was like, I don't have the energy to do any of this. No. But it was fun, like throwing the GPS coordinates for hello, kitty cat.
Oh yeah, Fluffy has a lot of feelings about what you're saying.
Good.
He is either very happy or very upset. You can never really know.
Can't really tell the difference. Cats are like that. Nope. They just never tell you the truth. Yeah.
They never tell you the truth. Although Fluffy doesn't have enough brain cells to be able to lie, to be honest.
That's Penny.
So
yeah, Penny only has several, and that she's like curled up on the couch like with a heating pad right now. Like she found a heating pad and is like laying on it. So I'm hoping.
Can I be petty?
Right?
Can I be on the couch with a heating pad right now?
But I'm hoping that means that she will just calm the fuck down and she will just not bark. So we'll see how far we get into this episode before she starts.
There you go. I picked up Fluffy. Rude. He's in my lap right now.
Aww.
And also, I have a sick child, so you're going to hear for sure some coughing coming through, but there's really nothing I can do about that.
Tell the kid to be quiet, Mary. This is serious podcasting. Right? God, how unprofessional.
I told him, I'm like, listen, if you have to cough, that's fine, but just don't go, sorry, every time.
Poor kid. I feel bad for the kid.
I know. He's had such a rough week, to be honest. Like,
I told Autumn some of the details,
yes.
And she was like, "Oh, that poor kid." And I was like, "Yes, because that's just the wrong age to like really be like to be cognizant of the shame and to like really be embarrassed more than anything." And I was like, "Yeah, it's a rough time. It's an absolute rough time."
It's a rough time, honestly. But he's fully aware that he's sick and like. Anyway, at one point. Oh, sorry. Oh no, I have fluffy hair in my mouth because I gave him a kiss. How dare I? He like at the beginning when he started being sick, he threw up, and that's what really, because like he doesn't often throw up, right? Like he's not a puker, and so like when he threw up, I was like, oh, something's really wrong, right? Like, and And he kept repeating in between waves, he's like, throwing up is normal. I was like, oh, my poor baby. It's
Poor
okay.
kid. Poor kid. It's okay to do some throw up
having
sometimes. It's fine.
Know, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, let's stop talking about throwing up. I
Yes.
guess.
Yeah. So we can talk about all the gross stuff that happens in this episode of Hannibal.
Yes. Although, is it?
I mean,
gross?
One character throws up an ear, so like I think that's pretty gross.
Yes,
yeah,
that's true. So let's stop talking about my kid throwing up, so we can talk about Will throwing up.
Yes,
about that.
100%, absolute 100%. Yeah, I'm excited.
So much fluffy hair. I'm sorry. Yes,
I'm excited to get into season 2. I don't like just with the way that time works. Like I've just watched season 1 so much, like it's the one that's ingrained in my memory. So like I see when I'm looking through Tumblr, like bored on the couch or whatever, and see stuff from season 2, I'm like, oh yeah. Like I'm really excited to get into it. So, and I had an idea of, since I'm unfamiliar with all of like the Japanese dishes that they're calling out.
Yeah.
I like looked up the first one, whose name I don't even remember now. But I was like, let me see if I like Autumn can cook. Like, let me see. Like, we cook like Asian food all of the time, right? But it's like it's kaseki, but it's not a dish. Like it's like a way to eat more than anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's a bummer for me because I was like, oh, I'm going to do the thing. It'll be fun.
You're going to do the dish. Yeah. That would have been really cool. Because that's the thing. Like, I really don't know much about Japanese cuisine or like the art of the table that they have, right? Because there's like definitely like an art and a pageantry to eating there that I'm just like not familiar with at all. And so I haven't looked at anything because I'm like, that's future Mary's problem.
Not after today.
Let's finish. Not after. I know. Now it's going to be current Mary's problem.
I just sent you a picture of what the Wikipedia says is kaseki.
Oh my god! Hold on. Let me do a live react to that. Oh wow. So like it's a bunch of tiny dishes. Is that what it is?
It's like according to
like tapas.
Kind of, yeah. It's like it's a multi-course dinner, right? So, but it also is like a collection of skills and techniques that allow the preparation of such meals, and analogous to Western hot cuisine. I'm reading directly from the wiki there. Yeah. Like, there's no. I was like, oh, like we can make orange chicken. Like that's a thing that we can do pretty easy. No.
Is that even Japanese? Like,
probably
is that
not.
From
No,
Japan?
No.
Okay. I don't think so.
Yeah. A lot of our typical quote unquote Chinese buffet stuff is just like, you know, here's some chicken with some sauce on it.
Yeah. I mean, so long as it's good, right? But that looks so nice though.
I know, right?
I'm like, can I try some of this?
I'm real intimidated by going to Asia or going to like Japan or China or Tokyo or anything like that. And just with the huge amount of cultural difference in the language block and everything, I'm just super intimidated by it. But at the same time, I'm just like, I want to eat all of the food, please. I would like to try everything.
Yeah. And I find it's pretty hard because like there's literally no reference point for me anyway, right? Like it's a different alphabet, like it's a completely different language, completely different way of writing things, a completely different way of approaching life in general, right? And it's also like as a visitor, you don't. Well, anyway, that's something that's important to me, but like, I don't want to be disrespectful, right? And so there's like, anyway, it feels like just such a, like you said, it's intimidating.
It's so
to
intimidating.
Consider going to these places.
My knife guy is over there right now. The ugly machine on Blue Sky. If you guys need knife services, he's
yes.
They're the man. But he's been posting like stuff like how obvious it is to spot tourists, just because they say things louder to be understood, which is always very funny to me. Like, oh, you can't understand my language. Maybe if I can increase the volume with which I say it, maybe that'll that'll beget comprehension. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm terrified of being a bad tourist. That's a thing that I really don't like. So.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. When my friends and I spent some time in Spain and Italy, because we could speak a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of Italian, but definitely not enough to like actually have conversations, right? And we also know that we don't sound like British, right? When we speak English, we sound American. So because people don't make the difference between Canada and the US and Europe. We were like, we would start speaking to people in French. We were like, do you speak French? In French, just so that they would not assume that we were American, so that we would be treated better, because like that is a thing.
Yeah. When we first went to Italy in 2004, when we got married, Autumn and I just pretended to be Canadian to everybody, because that was that was 3 years after 9/11, so that was the height of like the American weird war bullshit that was happening. So like we were just like, we're Canadian from the land of Canada.
Canada. That's amazing. Good. That's a good thing to do. Oh my goodness. All right, I am ready to go.
Okay, let's do it.
Just to let you know, though, my mom is supposed to come by to bring some vegetables in about like an hour or so. I have no clue when she's going to do that. I was like, it's not really a good time. And she's like, oh, well, I won't be long. I was like, okay, great.
Fine. No problem whatsoever. I will probably need a refill in water and to go, calm Penny down at some point. So it'll probably work out.
Amazing. So we'll tell Penny to wait until my mom gets here to freak out. And then she can freak out. All right.